Chapter 33. As soon as he stepped out of the shed, the first thing that Chen-Ong saw was a half-finished flying shuttle. It was only a skeleton with many exposed parts and pipe. It looked ugly and old. It was surrounded by parts that Anakin had picked up. Chen-Ong could tell that Anakin was a talented person. The parts that he picked up always looked old, but their performance was relatively stable. Anakin embarrassedly went up to help it up, wanting to make way for him. I always wanted to build my own flying shuttle, but Vada would never allow me to do that, so I hid it here. Hey! He struggled to lift the parts, but accidentally touched something. With a loud clang, the flying shuttle tilted and suddenly collapsed. The parts were scattered all over the ground. Anakin looked at the mess in front of him helplessly, scratching his head in frustration. Your idea is not bad, but it's slightly lacking in structural optimization. Chen-Ong smiled as he walked up to him, picked up a broken part on the ground and said, "Let me help you build it." A screen flashed in front of Chen-Ang's eyes. He mustered all his energy to collect mechanical knowledge from the communication waves in the sky. It was obvious that Tatooine was not a developed planet, even the internet was not widespread. Chen-Ong spent a lot of time to find a maintenance book titled Basics of Machinery, Tatooine's Trash Collection. In fact, according to Chen-Ang's habits, he would have started from the basics, but Tatooine was not a peaceful place. Not only was the technology outdated, it was also filled with pragmatism. The people of Tatooine only needed to know how to kill with weapons, they did not need to know how to make the weapons. On this interstellar planet, there were too many weapons that could pose a threat to Chen-Ong. Fortunately, the people of Tatooine did not have the habit of carrying armor and exoskeletons. If he encountered a storm soldier, Chen-Ong would not even be able to break through their armor. He desperately needed an identity to survive on Tatooine. The Skywalker is still a child, and the flying shuttle is not completed. Looks like there's still a long time before the Jedi Knights arrive. Technology and origin power coexist here, and spirituality and science are intertwined. It's truly a wondrous world with many things worth learning. Fortunately, the parts that Anakin collected were common on Tatooine. In fact, Anakin had no way of getting his hands on uncommon items. The only thing he could do was pick up some spare parts from Volto's shop that Volto did not care about, or go to the desert to collect trash. These two sources were both included in the book Tatooine's Trash Collection. From Anakin's point of view, Chen-Ong only hesitated for a long time in the beginning, probably because he was not familiar with the style and model of Tatooine's machinery. However, very quickly, Chen-Ong brought out the superb skills of a mechanic and led the repair. He was familiar with every part of the parts and could always assemble them just right. Anakin could not take his eyes off of Chen-Ong. He was almost in awe of him. You must be the best mechanic on Tatooine. If I had this ability, I would definitely be able to redeem my mother and myself. At this time, the flying shuttle in front of them had begun to show its splendor. Compared to the messy and worn-out appearance before, it now had a unique sense of order and beauty that was unique to machinery. During the process of repair, Chen-Ong had also done some maintenance and cleaning on the machines. Now, they looked like second-hand goods, completely different from their previous broken appearance. Actually, I should be able to do better. Right now, it's just a patchwork of parts. The only creative structure was designed by you. I'm only assembling them reasonably. It's not that amazing. Chen-Ong wiped his hands with a rag and said with some dissatisfaction. The technology of this world far surpassed that of Earth. There were many things that he did not understand that limited his abilities. In the end, Chen-Ong only dared to effectively use these parts to restore their state and assemble them according to the parameters. He did not even dare to change the structure that Anakin had designed. But that's the coolest part. How perfectly you use them. I dare say that you won't be able to find another mechanic like you in the whole of Tatooine. Those lousy fellows can't even tell the difference between a condenser and an activator, and their modified blasters will even explode. Anakin picked up a small crystal tube and gestured excitedly in front of Chen-Ong. Look, these crystal prisms are everywhere in blasters, but a complete activation module costs hundreds of dollars. But the activation module is just a crystal with some parts. No one on Tatooine dares to assemble it themselves. He looked at Chen-Ong with a look of extreme anticipation. You must be a mechanic from another planet. You're the best I've ever seen. But you're much better than me. Chen-Ong looked at the embarrassed Anakin with a mischievous smile. When I was your age, I was just a child who didn't know anything. Anakin lowered his head in embarrassment and pretended to suddenly come to a realization. He shouted, "Let's go! The Quinn people selling food outside are going to leave soon. They're always lazy and greedy, but they're the best at cooking here. But I don't want to eat Quinn food. If you're willing to introduce your family to me, I'll be very happy." Chen-Ong smiled and patted his head. "Are you willing to learn these from me? Let's discuss it. To be honest, I'm also learning." "Really?" Anakin raised his head in surprise, his eyes sparkling as he looked at Chen-Ong. "Are you really willing to teach me these?" All his mechanical knowledge was self-taught in Vota's shops. On Tatooine, only the masters would teach their slaves skills to increase the value of their property. "Don't call me by honorifics. You can just call me by my name, Chen-Ong." Chen-Ong smiled as he held his hand and taught him the syllables of his name. "No, I can't be so rude. I'll just call you teacher." Anakin looked at Chen-Ong and said firmly. He held Chen-Ang's hand passionately and said excitedly, "My mother will be very happy if she knows you're here." Chen-Ong looked at this stubborn child and suddenly laughed. "Since you're calling me teacher, then I'll take on this responsibility. Outstanding Jedi apprentice, future Dark Warrior, light or dark, it's up to you to choose." The towns on Tatooine were full of villains with bad intentions. Fortunately, with Anakin's guidance, Chen-Ong avoided any conflicts. Although Anakin was very young, he was very popular here. This might have something to do with his excellent mechanical talent and his willingness to help others. In the interstellar era, even Jedi warriors could not underestimate technological weapons. Chen-Ong was too unfamiliar with this place. If he was not careful, he would fall into someone else's trap. In this universe, the people on Earth were like natives who knew nothing. There were too many incredible technological products and racial abilities, far beyond Chen-Ang's imagination. This was a very dangerous world, but it was also a world full of opportunities. Chen-Ong believed that he could quickly become stronger, but the prerequisite was that he had time to develop. This period of peace was very precious. He was now rapidly learning and understanding this world with every minute and every second. Although there was a plot to guide him, a real universe had too many things that movies could not express. The history and culture of a planet were far beyond human imagination. This was a real, complex society. Chen-Ong reminded himself that this was not a single-player adventure game with you as the main character. It was not even a movie that revolved around a few main characters. It was a universe, a huge country that spanned thousands of planets. This place was complicated and ever-changing. Fate was not a few fixed plots. The actions of people affected each other, and the relationships between them were intricate and complicated. Only when Chen-Ong truly faced it would he be shocked by this galaxy. There were too many different races, different cultures, and a deep history. Looking up at the starry sky, he found that this was an unprecedentedly vast world. It was beyond all of Chen-Ang's imagination when he was on Earth. Anakin's home was not as distressed as Chen-Ong had imagined. Instead, it was full of warmth. Some small decorations and inconspicuous details revealed a sense of home. The comfort it gave Chen-Ong was far greater than that of the cold laboratory. Hearing the sound of the door opening, a gentle female voice came from the house. "Anakin, come here quickly. Try my new sauce." Chen-Ong saw a gentle mother walk out of the kitchen. She was obviously not surprised to see Chen Ong. Instead, she warmly invited him to sit. It's been a long time since we had a guest. Ever since Anakin chased that rude guy away, he hasn't brought anyone back. He must trust you a lot. Smith Skywalker, whose eyes were full of smiles, raised his eyebrows slightly at Chen Ong. He pulled out a chair for him and brought over his cup of hot tea. There's nothing in the kitchen to entertain our guest. Anakin, go buy some meat frogs. We can't use spotted sand beast meat to entertain our guest. I'll go prepare some mushrooms. Anakin responded and happily turned to leave. Smith sat in front of Chen Ong and smiled as she added hot water for him. Anakin respects you a lot. He was so mischievous when he was 7 that even I couldn't control him. I'm really surprised that there's someone who can control him. Hello, madam. Chen Ong smiled. My ship had just crashed in a storm. He was the one who saved me. Fortunately, I have the ability to repair things, so I can teach him some mechanical things. Chen Ong knew what she wanted to ask, but he did not feel offended. It was only natural for a mother to care for her child. Chen Ong was not one of those arrogant people who would easily feel insulted or looked down upon. He finally has a real teacher. Smith was very happy. You know, I've always been worried about how to train him. He likes these things, but I can't help him at all. Come, sir, I'll prepare a room for you. It'll be right next to Anakin. I hope you won't find him noisy. That's great. I'm poor now. If it wasn't for you, madam, I'm afraid I'd have to sleep outside. Chen Ong smiled. I'll open a repair shop in the city. I hope it'll be good business. Chapter 34. Chen Ang's fingertips tapped lightly, nimbly jumping on the bulky machinery, creating a flash of light. He followed the wires and structure, and with a light flick of his finger, he cleverly disassembled the parts on top. In just a few breaths, he had disassembled the radar into parts of different sizes. Casually picking up a charred transistor, Chen Ong waved it in front of a given that looked like a skeleton, and began to communicate with it in a complex language. These given were proficient in complex forms of mathematics, used to predict the increasingly complex astronomical changes on their home planet. Mathematics had also become the savior of the given, the core of their culture. Their research transcended mathematics, trying to see through time from equations, and solve the mysteries of life from mathematical puzzles. But even the skilled given had times where they had to struggle, and they were often helpless when it came to parts that did not cause obvious damage. This group of given had no choice but to land on Tatooine because of the damage to the radar. Chen Ong had discussed with them, and they would use the 6 given mathematical monographs that were carried on the spaceship to pay for the repair. The transistor here is completely damaged, you'll need to replace it with a new one. If you have a spare on your spaceship, I'll replace it for you. If not, you'll have to buy another transistor from me. Chen Ong smiled like a cunning fox, and the way he looked at the given made him look like a fat sheep. He took out a small computer and quickly typed in $12 for one transistor, $12,000 for shipping, and $150,000 for Tatooine's special tax. Due to rising prices, there's an additional 120% fluctuation. The given's face looked like it had been smashed by a sledgehammer. Only the heavens knew how the white organic bones on his face could make such a complex expression of shock, anger, heartache, and reluctance. He jumped up as if he had been pricked by a needle, and his voice was shrill. Why don't you go rob someone? Not even space pirates are as greedy as you. Chen Ong glanced at him, and his face made an appropriate expression that said, "Take it or leave it. I also rely on my skills to make a living. Earning your money is much faster than robbing," Chen Ong said nonchalantly. "I didn't even charge you for the repair, I only charge you for changing a part. What's wrong with that? Is it illegal? Let me tell you, in the entire Tatooine, I'm the only one who can modify these transistors. If you're not satisfied, you can wait a few years and see if the spaceships that land occasionally have the parts you want." This was why Chen Ong was so fearless. Maintenance was a competitive job, and if given spent some time, he might be able to find a replacement. Although Chen Ang's skills were the best here, the others could also fix it if they spent some time. After he realized that he had an irreplaceable advantage, he immediately put on the face of a monopolist. He almost said, "If you want to buy it, then buy it. If you don't, then forget it." Even his bones could not hide his anger. "We don't have that much money. If you can accept our currency, we might be able to gather that much." Chen Ong sneered through his nose. "That's wishful thinking on Given's part. Planet Yagdur's currency was useless on Tatooine." He rolled his eyes and ignored him. Given took out his communicator, and the person on the other side of the line grumbled for a while before he put down the communicator with great heartache. He glared fiercely at Chen Ong and said angrily, "Fix the radar first. Someone from our spaceship will come down later to give you something to choose from." Chen Ong immediately changed his expression, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. The people around him looked at him with admiration. In Tatooine, cunning and greed were not sins, but were instead enviable. Chen Ong had only opened his shop for 3 months, and he had already won the respect of everyone on the street with his ability to pull oil out of a rock. When he lowered his head to look at the radar, his face had already changed to a serious expression, and he carefully cleaned the dust and oil stains on the radar. At this moment, he became an extremely dedicated mechanic, and he treated his work harshly. This was also the reason why he had become the most famous maintenance expert on Tatooine in such a short period of time. Light and shadow appeared in his eyes, and the history of the radar was replayed bit by bit in his eyes. Its structure, function, design, and quality were all turned into data in Chen Ang's eyes, and he devoured the knowledge contained here hungrily. Unlike before, when he barely understood anything, Chen Ong now had the ability to understand some of the principles, and he was enriching his knowledge. Soon, several classic structures were disassembled in front of Chen Ang's eyes. He carefully optimized the design of the radar, but the modifications he made were very crude. Under the fearful gaze of Juven, Chen Ong completely dismantled the radar. Not even a single screw or wire was spared. Every single independent component was dismantled and reduced to the most basic individual component. Then, Chen Ong greatly simplified the component. Functions that would normally require 4 or 5 components to perform were replaced by a single simplified component. Such a bold and decisive transformation left Genvin's heart palpitating with fear and trepidation. When the final product came out, it was already 4 or 5 times smaller than the original. The simple structure had a different kind of industrial beauty. Juven fumbled with it obsessively, fascinated by this mathematical simplification. This design and mathematical optimization allowed the radar to strengthen its main functions while discarding all unnecessary redundancies. It was like solving a formula, simplifying and splitting it, and finally obtaining the simplest formula. The main advantage of the wave-frequency radar, the range of detection, had been optimized by Chen Ong with the curvature cyclotron structure. Its only shortcoming was that its functions were very simple. Even the simple analysis function had been removed, leaving only the function of data detection. This was very inconvenient for other races, but for the Juven, whose mental calculation speed was comparable to that of a photon computer, it was perfect. This is truly a miracle of mathematics. Juven held his breath, his eyes fixed on the finished product in front of him. He had long thrown his previous dissatisfaction to the back of his mind. This transformation, which was incomparably in line with their aesthetic standards, was full of suffocating tension. The beauty of mathematics was vividly embodied. This kind of extreme symmetry is simply a poem written by the goddess of mathematics, Juven said excitedly. He had long thrown his previous grudge to the back of his mind. He caressed the shiny machine. The Juven people lived under the theocracy of mathematics. Their most talented mathematicians became priests and preservers of knowledge. Even the most ordinary Juven regarded mathematics as the most beautiful art. The parts in front of him were undoubtedly works of art that embodied this art. It was so elegant that he could not bear to put them down. The others could not understand this emotion of the Juven people. Even though Chun-Ong was a modified person, he could not see any beauty in this cold machine. Everyone looked at the intoxicated expression on the Juven people's face as if he had seen his lover. They only felt a chill in their hearts. After selling the pants to Chun-Ong, the Juven people left in satisfaction. Even though they had been ruthlessly butchered by Chun-Ong, they still looked satisfied. They even left the chip that recorded the Juven priest's research on mathematics to Chun-Ong as a sign of respect for a master mathematician. Chun-Ong flipped through the information left by the Juven people on the photon computer. This mathematical information had completely subverted his common sense. The accumulation of a mathematical civilization in the universe had allowed their research in this area to reach an astonishing level. It could be said that other than 1% of the known content, the remaining mathematical knowledge was indescribable to Earth's civilization. Just like how humans could not clearly understand imaginary numbers, how could they imagine a mathematical system based on imaginary numbers? Chun-Ong could somewhat understand the mentality of the Juven people who regarded mathematics as a form of theology. Everything could be expressed using mathematics, and everything could be understood using mathematics. Perhaps in the eyes of the Juven priests, the world was made up of a series of mathematical formulas. They were inspired by this and understood the world. He raised his hand and entered a series of data into the optical computer. Chun-Ong quickly calculated. Different parameters were added one after another, and the results of the calculations were produced. However, the mathematical symbols in his hands were constantly changing, from addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, square root, to the unique mathematical symbols of the Juven people. P.S. I caught a cold yesterday, so I didn't update last night. My head is still a little dizzy. This chapter didn't turn out well, so I'm going to rest first. If I recover today, there will be 2 chapters. If not, there will only be 1 chapter. Chapter 35. Endless amounts of data. Finally, it was replaced by the hexagram representing yin and yang. The ancient symbols of the 8 trigrams represented the information that only Chun-Ong understood. Calculating and evolving, Chun-Ong had completely changed his way of thinking. The mathematical system that originated from modern Earth was gradually replaced by the mathematical system of givens and the fuzzy algorithm of the Book of Changes. In his mind, the torrent of data composed of Arabic numerals was replaced by a few constantly evolving hexagram symbols. If Chun-Ong could only use simple data to reflect the attributes of objects before, now his ability to reflect the data of objects had reached a new height. Looking at the scattered old parts in front of him, what appeared were no longer simple data such as its length, width, height, mass, and density, but more complex symbols that represented its attributes, involving cause and effect, space-time, and simple yet complicated formulas composed of yin and yang hexagram symbols. The progress in mathematical algorithms did not bring much superficial gains to Chun-Ong, but it deeply affected his growth. Scientists could understand the world deeply and deconstruct the truth with just the simple mathematics on Earth. With the more advanced mathematical system of the aliens, Chun-Ang's path to understanding the world became smoother. His brain was like a well-equipped computer that finally met its own software, greatly improving its efficiency. "Hey teacher, I heard that the sandstorm outside the city has brought in another batch of garbage. If we're late, the Javas will search the place clean." Anakin's voice came from afar. He hopped over to Chun-Ong, carrying a box that was almost as tall as him. It looked a little funny. Chun-Ong smiled and took the box behind him, got up, and said, "Come, let me show you something." Anakin narrowed his eyes and asked in confusion, "What is it?" He followed Chun-Ong into the shop and came to a hidden room. At a glance, he saw two things that emitted a metallic luster on the table in the room. One was a triangular skateboard-like metal plate. The front of the plate was slightly raised, and the body of the plate was streamlined. Overall, it looked like a silver eagle with its wings spread, emitting a silver metallic glow. The other one looked like a black mat handle. The handle was about 2 palms long, and it was slightly curved with a thin metal wire wrapped around it. The mat body looked inconspicuous, but it looked ferocious, with a hint of murderous intent. "What is this?" Anakin turned to look at Chen Ong in confusion. Chen Ong did not answer him. Instead, he got up and walked over. He gently took the silver skateboard from the shelf. With a buzzing sound, the skateboard suddenly lit up with a thin layer of silver light. It quietly floated in the air about 3 feet above the ground, and the light flickered faintly. Chen Ong leaped up and planted his feet on the silver disc. With a soft sound, 2 red gravitational beams attached to the soles of his feet and stuck firmly to the surface of the silver disc. The silver disc hummed and shot out with Chen Ong, rushing out of the house and disappearing high into the sky. Anakin cheered and held his breath in excitement. He leaned against the window and looked at the place where Chen Ong disappeared, his eyes full of anticipation. "Teacher, you're amazing!" Seeing Chen Ong fly back, Anakin cheered. A small flying machine, a single-person flying machine. No one on Tatooine has ever made such a small flying machine. Compared to your flying machine, their flying shuttle is clumsy, heavy, and inconvenient. This is too awesome, too cool. Teacher, you must teach me. Chen Ong leaped down from the silver plate. The long hair on his forehead was a little messy because of his fast speed. He pointed to the side, and the silver plate obediently floated over. It's called the silver disc. It's a custom-made single-person flying machine. The specialty of the silver disc is its flexible anti-gravity engine. It can perform all kinds of difficult flying maneuvers. If you're familiar with it, you'll be even more agile than the birds in the sky. Chen Ong raised his hand. He did not seem to move at all, but the silver disc floating in the air suddenly exploded with a burst of silver light. It turned into a shadow that wandered around the room. The silent silver lightning was as agile as a swallow, weaving through the messy items without stirring up a single speck of dust. Anakin's little face trembled with excitement. His voice trembled. It's amazing. It's so agile. If I sit on it, I'm sure no one will be able to catch up to me. Oh my God!" He saw clearly that when the silver disc moved, it was indeed a silver line. This made the blood in his body that belonged to a pilot boil. The efficiency of the brainwave controller is not high. You can only control it freely within a kilometer of it. But I added this. Chen Ong opened his sleeve and revealed a silver armband. The quantum controller can control it from within the planet, but it can only set a simple flight path. Teacher, can I have one like this? Anakin's eyes sparkled as he looked at Chen Ong expectantly. He was attracted to the silver disc as soon as he saw it. It was agile, fast, light, and agile. Such a flying machine attracted his attention. Anakin felt that there was no better flying machine on Tatooine. Unfortunately, Anakin, you're not suited to use it yet. Chen Ong shook his head. Due to the limitations of the materials, although this flying machine had reached the best level, it was still not perfect. Why? Anakin lowered his head dejectedly, his eyes filled with disappointment. Chen Ong raised his hand to put away the silver disc and handed him a small optical computer. The flying machine lacks a protective shield. Flying it will be strongly stimulated by the wind. At the speed of sound, the strong wind is enough to suffocate you. This is the information on flying machines. I hope you can go back and look at it, and design your own flying machine. Reaching out to pick up the black handle in front of him, Chen Ang's expression was slightly solemn. There was even a rare hint of hesitation. He hesitated for a moment, but finally picked up the 2 handles and stood them upright in front of him. Seeing Chen Ong like this, Anakin could not help but retract his longing for the silver disc. He looked at the two handles curiously. He saw Chen-Ong press down on the bottom of the handle, and with a crackling sound, the end of the handle, near the metal wire, suddenly shot out a blade of light. Lightsaber! Anakin could not help but exclaim. This special weapon of the Jedi was famous throughout the galaxy. It could be said that this fluorescent longsword brought great pressure to ambitious people in the universe. It deterred the restless dark forces, and was deeply loved by ordinary people. Every child grew up in the legend of the Jedi, and their dream was to have their own lightsaber. This is not a lightsaber. Although Anakin was looking forward to it, Chen-Ong still shattered his fantasies. This is just a modified fusion cutter. The fusion cutter was a very common tool in maintenance workshops all over the Milky Way. These handheld cutting torches used high-energy plasma beams to cut high-density metals, plastic-resistant materials, and other tough materials. It was a very dangerous tool, but the limited length of the cutting beam made it impossible for this everyday tool to be used as an effective weapon on the battlefield. But the cutter in Chen-Ang's hands was different. The cutting beam of nearly 50 centimeters was already effective enough to kill and injure enemies. In Chen-Ang's hands, the indestructible high-energy beam was a terrifying killing weapon. Chen-Ong, who was skilled in martial arts, was already extremely proficient in killing technique. In his hands, this weapon would display astonishing lethality. Chen-Ong had even specially customized a set of practical sword techniques for it, already giving it extreme lethality. The dancing blade of light carried an extremely powerful and terrifying lethality. Chen-Ang's wrist shook slightly, and a flower of light bloomed in front of him. Pointing, flicking, wiping, stabbing. The agile blade of light was like a silver star, flashing against Chen-Ang's body. It was beautiful, dazzling, dangerous, and terrifying. The wandering light beam transformed into a field of light and shadow. Under the layers of light, it was dazzling. A suffocating killing intent, hidden under the gorgeous light, was like a silver needle pricking Anakin's body, causing him to tense up and stare straight at this dangerous sword technique. As expected of the Son of Force, Chen-Ong saw Anakin's body instinctively on guard, keenly sensing the danger under this beauty, and could not help but exclaim in admiration. This kind of excellent quality was simply a natural-born warrior. One had to know that Chen-Ang's state of mind was calm, and the killing intent in his sword technique was extremely well hidden. Anakin could feel the magnificence under this tranquility. This quality could be said to be a natural-born swordsman. Chen-Ong casually tossed over a hilt, and the blade of light in Chen-Ang's hand swayed. From tomorrow onwards, you will learn sword techniques from me. This high-frequency ion blade will be your sword. Without waiting for Anakin's reply, Chen-Ong turned and left. Teacher, where are you going? To pick up trash. With a new guy, it's time to teach those Sand Nation people a lesson. Chen-Ang's voice was filled with coldness. He had tolerated the bandits of the wasteland who often came to harass them for a long time. These wolf-like races of the wasteland unscrupulously attacked the residents who left the city. It was time to tell them whose territory this was. P.S. I feel much better. Making up for yesterday's update, there should be one more update tonight. Well, that's if I don't feel dizzy. Chapter 36. In the ancient sea of sand dunes, the wreckage of spaceships abandoned during thousands of years of interstellar travel was everywhere. This was also the source of most of Tatooine's machinery. The farmers of the Moisture Farm relied on the recycling machinery provided by the Javas to maintain the production of agricultural products. Tatooine was a planet built on garbage and crime. The criminal syndicate controlled by Jabba the Hutt and the trade circle of the Moisture Farm constituted all of the social elements here. This remote and desolate planet was a paradise for thieves, liars, and robbers. But ironically, this planet had the influence to overthrow the galactic regime. The biggest source of supply for the second-hand repair shop opened by Chen-Ong was this sea of sand. The slow and stupid Javas provided the parts and materials he needed. This was a magical place. For Chen Ong, it was an untapped treasure trove. Tens of thousands of technological products were buried under the sand dunes. They came from at least 100 different civilizations. All kinds of unimaginable technologies were dazzling. Anti-gravity engines could be seen everywhere in this place, and they were cheap civilian products. The scavengers on Tatooine had said that someone had once picked up a gravity well projector that could create a gravitational pull comparable to a planet's gravity. It was said that there was also a military hyperdrive, which was a fatal attraction to Chen Ong. Teacher, look here. A red electronic eye floated in front of Anakin. He staggered on a silver plate and pointed at a blurry red dot on the screen of the electronic eye. This kind of old electronic eye was usually used on old robots. It had performance comparable to large radars and sonars on Earth, and its accuracy was even better. Chen Ong had modified one to search for items buried under the sand dunes. The gravel is mobile, and nothing of value is exposed to the air. A tentacle-like robot snake wiggled agilely and burrowed into the sand. After a while, it arched out of the sand with a worn-out metal part. It wagged its head and tail and brought it to Chen Ong. Not bad. It's an electromagnetic flow auxiliary engine. It should be from one of the airships that crashed, Chen Ong said with some surprise. Teacher, will you use it to complete the armor? The red one in your room. Anakin was obviously obsessed with the pile of test subjects in Chen Ang's room. Chen Ong furrowed his eyebrows. That Iron Man armor that he had imitated on a whim was obviously not his masterpiece. Chen Ong had only realized after he had completed it that this kind of weapon, which limited his agility, was completely useless. Its lethality and resistance were incomparable to the flying robot. Its defense was also poor. It had no protection against high-temperature, electromagnetic, and energy weapons. Perhaps the metal would be safe, but the people inside would probably be heated and roasted. In a place like Earth, where kinetic weapons were mainly used, it was not the best. In the interstellar era, it was even more obsolete. Unless an energy shield is installed, it has no practical value, but if there is an energy shield, what is the role of the Iron Man armor's protective ability? Compared to those flexible combat robots, this armor that hindered of human agility was just of a tin can. However, this was only his thought. Anakin was attracted by the cool appearance of the toy, and he could not forget about it. Anakin, Jedi don't know how to use armor. Chen Ong knew how to distract this kid. As expected, Anakin immediately threw the Iron Man armor to the back of his mind when he heard the word Jedi. He, who had dreamed of the Force since young, had unconsciously imitated the Jedi. His biggest dream was to become an outstanding Jedi. His biggest dream was to become an outstanding Jedi and come back to liberate the slaves of Tatooine. He held the black handle at his waist excitedly. He was obviously very fond of this weapon that looked like a lightsaber. Anakin, fly higher. Suddenly, Chen Ang's expression darkened. He controlled the silver disc to fly high into the sky. Anakin looked down in confusion. Dozens of Sand Nation wearing thick robes and masks appeared from afar on Bansa Beast. They approached them in the blink of an eye. No! Anakin shouted on the silver disc. His body struggled violently, trying to get rid of the gravitational beam that was sucking him in. The Sand Nation was a scavenger's nightmare. They would torture and kill every outsider they saw, rob the scavengers' wealth, and cut off their heads to show off their martial arts. These aliens, hidden in long robes, waved the Garfield rods in their hands. The sharpened superalloy rod head was enough to tear apart the alloy deck of a spaceship. The Sand Nation would use the toughest metal they could find to make this weapon. It was usually the keel of the spaceship's chassis, and its performance could be said to be indestructible. Chen Ong raised his eyelids. Unlike the worried and emotional Anakin, his expression was indifferent, as if he did not care at all that he was surrounded. From afar, A Sandman fired a shot at the silver disk floating in the sky. However, Chen Ong had considered the range of the projectile rifles used by the Sandmen, so it was impossible for them to hit the silver disk high up in the sky. A Sand Nation riding a Bansha beast roared and waved its deadly alloy rod at Chen Ang's head. There was a buzzing sound, and the white blade of light slashed down diagonally. A scorching white blade light wrapped around Chen Ang's figure as it shot out like lightning. It touched the alloy rod slightly, and the powerful ion blade cut through the suprael. There was only a faint sound of electric current, and the Sandman's head flew into the sky. The Sandman who was charging over shouted angrily. He pulled the reins of the Bansha and leaped down from the Bansha nimbly before charging toward Chen Ong with big strides. The sturdy Sandman in the lead kicked with all his might and leaped up several meters. The alloy rod dipped in poison in his hand smashed toward Chen Ang's head with a strong gust of wind. The light blade flew like a dragon, and a long river of white light flowed backward, silently sprinkling out a silver glow. The overlapping light and shadow was dazzling, and all that could be seen was a blazing white light. The Sandman could not help but close his eyes. Based on the impression in his heart, he waved the blade stick in his hand. But Chen Ong had already taken a step back and placed the blade of light diagonally in front of the Sand Nation. He watched as the Sand Nation's body fell on the blade of light, and the Sand Nation, along with the spear, was split into two. The alloy rod flew out of his hand and sank into the sand in front of him. The Sand Nation's body structure was special, and they could often exert extremely powerful strength. They could often climb thousands of meters of cliffs with their bare hands, jump between steep rocks, and dig rock caves for shelter with their bare hand. Even with cold weapons, they were the most terrifying attackers on Tatooine. But in Chen Ang's hands, their bodies that were as tough as steel were like tofu. Their rubber-like skin was as thin as a piece of paper under the blade of light, and they were split in half with a light stroke. The Sand Nation wailed in unison and stared angrily at Chen Ong. They gathered together and cooperated with each other, hitting the alloy rod and singing an unknown song. They pressed toward Chen Ong. After losing their companions, they became even more ferocious and calm, trying to put psychological pressure on Chen Ong so noisy. Chen Ong swung the blade of light lightly and looked at the group of fierce Sand Nation. In the wilderness, the strong are respected. Isn't that the law of survival on Tatooine? He tapped the tip of his foot and pounced forward like a ghost. A blazing white blade of light flashed past. Even though the Sand Nation was waving the alloy rod in its hand tightly, it was still left wide open after a light knock by Chen Ong. The blade of light flashed through its body and disappeared. Sizzle! There was a sound of electricity, and a burnt smell came from his wound. The Sand Nation's body was cut in half at the waist, but there was no blood spilling out. The high-energy blade of light sealed his wound and killed him instantly. Dozens of Sandmen pounced on Chen Ong at the same time, screaming shrilly. These mutants were as agile as wild beasts. Their long hunting life had given them rich experience, and they had great teamwork. A few bolts of lightning shot out from their metal rods and wrapped around their bodies as they rushed toward Chen Ong. Chen Ong held the blade of light in his hand and moved as nimbly as a civet. He raised the blade of light at the first Sand Nation that charged at him, and with a shake of his wrist, he slashed out dozens of light shadows at the same time. The high-speed vibrating blade of light easily cut the Sand Nation and its rod in half. At the same time, he casually slashed forward with the blade of light twice, blocking the Sand Nation's alloy-bladed rod that was thrusting at him. The vibrating force of the blade of light shook off their weapons and slashed horizontally at their waists. Two upper bodies fell diagonally. Chen Ong pulled back and fired the blaster in his left hand at the chest of a Sand Nation. At the same time, the blade of light in his right hand shot out at the same time. He tiptoed on the alloy rod on the ground and threw it out with a backhand swing, piercing the chest of the Sand Nation that was blocking the particle beam. The light blade cut through the lightning. Chen Ong tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot and soared into the air. In an instant, he swept past the 4 Sandmen bandits who had surrounded him. The light blade transformed into a sword flower and swept across their throats. It was a move from the Hung Mountain swordsmanship, returning wind and falling wild geese. With 5 or 6 halos, he put them on the heads of the Sandmen. Chapter 37. In Chen Eng's hands, the short blade of light was like a ray of fatal light that always silently appeared at the vital points of the Sandmen. Often, before they could see the sparkling white blade clearly, they would hear the buzzing sound of the sword coming from below their necks. Then, they would feel an electric shock that would plunge them into eternal darkness. In Anakin's eyes, the Sandmen's attacks were as fierce as a sandstorm. The alloy rods in their hands were enough to smash the skulls of the Bansha beasts, and the plasma and toxins on the alloy rods were enough to kill a crate dragon. However, these bandits who had survived a reign of terror could not do anything to the sword-wielding man in front of them. In his hands, the blade of light seemed to have a life of its own. Like a nimble snake, it shuttled between the saber rods that the Sandmen were waving. Every time it jumped, the agile bodies of the Sandmen seemed clumsy and full of flaws. The sword light rapidly pierced through their flaws, easily taking away the lives of the Sandmen one after another. Very soon, the Sand People noticed their companions falling one after another. They wailed hoarsely, and their shrill voices traveled dozens of miles away. Even though the Sand People were fierce, they were still made of flesh and blood after all. They would also feel afraid of this kind of fearless death, and soon, they dispersed in an uproar. Chen Ong chased after their backs and assassinated another 3 Sandmen. Then, he saw more than 10 Sandmen flipping over the Bansha beasts and escaping in a sorry state. When they left, there were only 1/3 of their original numbers. The remaining Bansha beasts that had lost their masters wailed in confusion as they paced back and forth in front of their former masters. "Teacher, the Sandmen are very difficult to deal with." Anakin hurriedly climbed down from the silver plate and looked at the corpses of the Sandmen on the ground solemnly. "They will remember the people who killed their own kind. Once they find you in the wasteland, the large Sandmen tribes in the wasteland will launch an attack on you. They will regard you as their mortal enemy." "Mortal enemy? Then let them regard me as their mortal enemy again." Chen Ong patted his head nonchalantly. "No matter what the Sandmen choose, they will only be left with 2 simple choices: live or die. We don't have to make a choice. The weak are the ones who need to be considered." Anakin looked up at Chen Ong in surprise. "Anakin, as my disciple, the most important thing is to stick to your principles, do what you think you should do, and bear the consequences. I chose to tolerate it because I couldn't bear the consequences of doing so, and because I didn't have the power to protect you at that time. A principle without strength is a pale promise. Strength without principles was like a blade held upside down. This is the spirit of chivalry. It is free and at the same time, it sticks to the bottom line." Chen Ong pointed at the corpse on the ground and asked, "Now tell me, what are your principles?" Anakin looked at the blood around him and pondered for a long time. "The Sandmen are the bandits of the wastelands. Many families have been broken because of them. When they attacked Master, I wanted to kill them and felt that I should, but I couldn't bring myself to kill someone who couldn't fight back. I think all I can persist in is perhaps prudence." "Well said, Anakin. You must always remember what I said today. When you are faced with the temptation of darkness, you must remember to treat killing with prudence. The spirit of chivalry is free and unrestrained, but to bear the consequences and responsibility of one's actions and to stick to the principles in one's heart should always be the same." Chen Ong waved his hand to summon the silver disc and stepped on it. "All right, now that the Sandmen should think that they have shaken us off, according to the rules of Tatooine, we should go collect the spoils of war." The red electronic eye flickered slightly, and on the projected light screen, a few blue dots stopped at a hidden spot on the map. With a slight shake of his foot, the silver disc shot out like lightning. Anakin lowered his head in silence for a moment, then suddenly looked up and asked, "Master, are you a chivalry?" Chen Ong looked into the distance of the desert and did not answer for a long time. Only the sound of their clothes flapping in the wind could be heard from the silver disc. Anakin thought he had said something wrong, and just as he was hesitating to apologize to Chen Ong suddenly spoke. "I am. There is a part of me that belongs to the spirit of chivalry." "What about the other part?" Anakin asked curiously. "The other part should be the spirit of immortals. Free and unfettered, searching from top to bottom, persevering in oneself, grasping one's heart. Chivalry is a person, immortals are a path. Just like a Jedi." Anakin held the handle of the light blade and recited, "No need for passion, calm the mind. Do not follow the ignorant, follow the true knowledge. Do not indulge in lust, be calm and clear. There is no destruction, only the force." He suddenly put down the light blade and looked at Chen Ong with sparkling eyes. "Master, I want to be a Xianxia. I like its creed more, there is a sense of freedom." "Ha ha! This is different. You'd better be an honest Jedi." Chen Ong laughed heartily and said, "I'm just a Tao seeker. I've only seen a small part of the road ahead. When the day comes when I truly understand it, I'll come back to tell you and ask for your choice." As they spoke, they could vaguely see a huge canyon in front of them. It was like an ugly crevice, piercing through the rocky plateau in front of them. The silver disc stuck close to the cliff and quickly dived into the canyon. In the distance, a blurry silver shadow shone under the sunlight. "What's that?" Anakin curiously covered his eyes and stared at the silver dot with narrowed eyes. As the silver disc rapidly approached, the silver dot grew larger and larger, and soon a blurry shadow could be seen. "It's a spaceship. A large spaceship," Anakin shouted excitedly. He pointed at the flat silver shadow in the distance, extremely excited. Chen Ong adjusted his direction and quickly flew toward the spaceship from a more concealed angle. As he got closer, Chen Ong realized that it was an abandoned spaceship. It must have met with an accident. The huge impact mark on the starboard side proved this. The blue dot on the radar was flashing where the spaceship was. From the sky, he could see a few Sandmen tents set up outside the spaceship, and some Sandmen were going in and out of the spaceship. It seemed that one of the unfortunate spaceships had been used as a stronghold by the Sandmen. With such a big piece of meat in front of him, Chen Ong would certainly not miss it. With a flash, the silver disc slid to the bottom of the spaceship. A few Sandmen were resting there, and when they saw Chen Ong, they hurriedly picked up their weapons. Chen Ong could even see the bloodstains from the previous battle on their weapons. The leader of the Sandmen roared, and said with difficulty in the language commonly used on Tatooine, "Foreigner, leave this place. Or die." Dozens of Sandmen gathered behind him, staring at Chen Ong with an extremely resentful gaze. Some of the Sandmen who had not experienced the battle began to stir. Chen Ong pulled out the handle, and with a soft hiss, a blazing white blade of light poked its head out. "Sandmen, leave my spoils of war, or die." Before he finished speaking, a few Sandmen could not hold it in any longer, and with a roar they pounced forward. The rest of the Sandmen hesitated for a moment before following suit. This time, there were more Sandmen, and the leader of the Sandmen was holding an alloy rod that was at least twice the weight of an ordinary Sandman, and swung it through the air. The ferocious blade of the rod flickered with blue lightning, and with an incomparably fierce force, it struck straight at the top of Chen Ang's head. Behind him, several alloy rods with protruding blades flew out of the Sandman's hands and slashed at Chen Ong. The lightsaber in Chen Ang's palm spun, and with a backhand grip on the hilt, his body suddenly dashed out, turning into a stream of light, and rushed into the middle of the Sandmen. His body twisted into a strange shape, and he shrunk into a small ball, avoiding the first wave of attacks from the Sandmen. His body suddenly sprang open like a spring, and the lightsaber stuck close to his body, drawing a strange arc. The lightsaber stuck close to the Sandmen, and every time it flickered, a Sandman bandit would fall. Chen Ang's footsteps suddenly intersected in a complicated manner, and with a flip of his body, he appeared behind the leader of the Sandmen from the front. Then, the lightsaber stabbed out, and easily sank into the Sandman's spine. Then, the lightsaber flipped in a circle, and the fluctuating high-energy particle beam completely destroyed the Sandman's nervous system. Plop! The body of the Sandman leader fell with a loud thud. Chen Ong floated up from the Sandman leader's body and used it as a shield. He immediately felt the vibrations of the body in his hand. Dozens of shrapnel had turned the Sandman leader into a pile of mush, but Chen Ong had already circled behind them, and the lightsaber in his hands swiped lightly. Before they could react, two of their heads hung down heavily, revealing the back of their heads. Their bodies swayed a few times, and they fell heavily to the ground. Chen Ang's reaction was simply bullying the Sandmen. The lightsaber in his hands danced around, and he calmly calculated the Sandmen's vital points, using the least amount of effort to kill them one by one. Every time the lightsaber flashed, it would be accompanied by the sound of a body falling. Very soon, the Sandman tribe could not hold on any longer. Chapter 38. The silver hull of the spaceship reflected a faint light. It was obvious that the entire spaceship was well preserved. When Chen Ong entered through the hole in the spaceship, he could only see a small area made up of about 4 to 5 rooms. The other areas were blocked off by thick alloy walls. The Sand People did not leave any traces here. It was obvious that they cleaned and maintained the spaceship frequently. Chen Ong could even see some precious agate embedded in the corridor. Some strange words and symbols were carved with crystal powder. They extended along the corridor all the way to the large warehouse in the innermost part of the spaceship. A few dreamy and beautiful stone pearls were embedded in the ceiling, forming a strange symbol. This is the Great Dragon Ball. This is the sacred land of the Sand People. Anakin exclaimed. The Great Dragon was the most dangerous existence in the Junland wasteland. There were several subspecies of them. They were also called canyon dragons. They were up to 10 meters tall and up to 30 meters long when fully grown. The Great Dragon grew throughout its life. They would become stronger as they grew older. They had 5 sharp horns on their heads and horny bone plates on their faces. The Sand People revered these ferocious creatures. They worshipped the ferocity and lethality of these beasts. The Great Dragon Ball was a precious stone hidden in the sand pouch of the Great Dragon Ball. It was also the favorite ornament of the Sand People to decorate their sacred land. Chen Ong pinched the smooth stone and squinted at the sun to examine its gorgeous and ever-changing patterns. In his eyes, the Great Dragon Ball was surrounded by a circle of faint golden radiating light patterns. It was filled with warm but not violent energy. The Great Dragon Ball is very beautiful. It is a luxury item loved by many of the planet's upper-class people. They usually spend a lot of money to buy it as ornaments, Anakin explained. Every Tatooine citizen was very familiar with this precious specialty. This Dragon Ball is not simple. Chen Ong laughed. If it is only used as an ornament, it would be too stingy. His inner force touched the Dragon Ball slightly. He felt the gentle energy slowly leaking from it, expanding his meridians little by little. It was like the morning sun warming his body. He put away the Dragon Ball and ignored the confused Anakin behind him. He slowly walked to the alloy door and raised his hand to press on the metal wall in front of him. The dull silver alloy suddenly glowed with a white light. The luster of the metal quickly faded away, revealing a transparent crystal material. A few lines of faint blue mysterious text appeared on the surface. Chen Ong gently tapped on it a few times and the text quickly faded away. Soon, a holographic image of a spaceship floated in front of them. What is this? Anakin was very curious. The blueprint of this spaceship. I've retrieved it from the optical computer. The Sandmen are indeed a bunch of stubborn fools. How long has the optical computer terminal been here? They've actually never noticed it. Anakin felt like he was choking. He looked blankly at the identical metal walls around him, trying to see the secrets hidden inside. After a long time, he gave up the idea dejectedly because he really could not see any difference. He thought sadly, could it be that my intelligence is similar to the Sandmen's? This is a research spaceship. It has crashed here for tens of thousands of years, but fortunately, the instruments inside are very well preserved. Many things are still there today, and the functional areas are very complete. I think it's time for me to move to another place. Chen-Ong enlarged the holographic image of the spaceship and smiled. Can it fly into the sky? Anakin was pleasantly surprised. The damage is not great, but with Tatooine's conditions, it is impossible to repair such a large spaceship. Tatooine's large-scale technology is at least 3 generations behind this spaceship. They can repair small spaceships, but don't even think about dealing with a research spaceship like this, Chen-Ong said calmly. An alloy wall behind him suddenly opened without warning, revealing a passage. Follow me closely, Chen-Ong ordered Anakin and stepped into the passage. The functional areas of the large spaceship were arranged in an orderly manner. Generally, it was a layout of large areas and small areas. The passages were also simple and clear. A wider main road connected the major areas, and crisscrossing side roads connected the various rooms and corridors. This could at least support the living and research of 1,000 people. Taking into account the consumption of research materials, it could also support the survival of 500 people. But such a large research spaceship was actually empty. Although there were still traces of human life in many places, there was not a single living being, not even a corpse. It was as if the people here had all retreated in an orderly manner. Abandoning such a damaged spaceship for a more complicated evacuation of people? Such behavior was really incomprehensible. Chen-Ong opened a laboratory and saw the neatly packed experimental equipment and materials inside. After a simple search, he had to admit that this place had indeed been abandoned. All the experimental data had been taken away, and most of the equipment and data had also been cleared. Even some of the equipment that needed to be kept properly had been carefully stored away. It was as if the researchers here had collectively gone on a long journey, and would soon return after carefully packing up. But this place had been silent for tens of thousands of years. The spaceship had just obediently stayed in the crevice of the canyon, and had even been buried by the yellow sand. Until one day, the Sand People discovered this place and made it a sacred place. How is it? Anakin, do you want to live here? Chen-Ong left the laboratory and brought Anakin to the captain's cabin of the spaceship. He spoke to him as he inspected the condition of the spaceship. Anakin raised his head in surprise when he heard that, but after a while, he lowered his head dejectedly and murmured, "But Volta was unwilling to let me go. Even if I promised him a large sum of money, he was unwilling to release my mother from her slave status. He did promise to let me redeem myself, but he wanted me to work for him. He would only redeem my mother after 10 years. He has Jabba backing him up. He said that if I dared to escape without permission, he would give my ownership to Jabba and let him send bounty hunters to hunt us down. Let me talk to him." Chen-Ong smiled and comforted him. "Go and clean up a room first. We still have to assemble the robots later. When this place is cleaned up, I'll go and talk to Jabba. I hope he'll like my way of talking." "Really? Teacher? That's great." Anakin cheered, picked up the optical computer beside him, and rushed out of the room. In the captain's cabin, there was direct management authority for the entire spaceship. Chen-Ong operated the spaceship and activated the stealth mode. At the same time, he controlled the laser cannons on both sides to smash the stone walls on both sides of the cliff, allowing the endless yellow sand to pour down and bury the spaceship tightly. One more sandstorm and the terrain here would completely disappear. The maintenance robots on the spaceship began to move, maintaining the operation of the spaceship. However, the materials and energy on the spaceship still needed to be replenished from the outside. Currently, the spaceship's daily energy supply was sufficient, but it was only enough for the spaceship to operate for a year. This was the solar energy that the spaceship had collected for tens of thousands of years. If the main engine could not be started to provide power for the spaceship, it could only be powered by external high-energy batteries. The efficiency of the main engine's energy node was much higher than that of the batteries. Using the latter to supply energy would definitely cost a lot. It was like using a coal stove to burn leaves. It was bound to take twice the effort for half the result. These days, in addition to concentrating on learning the scientific knowledge of this world, Chunong also studied the various alien races of this world. These magical races had different kinds of abilities, forms, and abilities. A close relative of plasma leeches, the wool cabashites, had a magical body. Their bodies were made of flesh and blood, and the metal content in their blood was very high. Because their diet was rich in plasma, it formed a magnetic field around their body, and certain internal muscles, such as their tongues, could control this magnetic field. This magical ability gave Chunong a lot of inspiration. Electricity and magnetism were one of the basic energies of the world. They contained deep mysteries and had a terrifying power that could affect the world and pry open the truth. It was not inferior to internal force. There was a comic on Earth called Sea Tigers, in which the power of magnetic field rotation had the power to shock the real world. Gravity, electromagnetism, temperature, vector, fluid, light intensity, these basic physical forces also seem to have a broad space for expansion. Originally, Chunong needed to wait until his overclocking control reached the genetic level before he could conduct research on the physics of Esper abilities. However, the wool cabashites gave him a new inspiration: human body modification technology. Unlike the mechanical human body modification that was currently popular in the Milky Way, Chunong was more inclined to imitate the various magical creatures of the universe, study the mysteries of their bodies, and use mimicry methods to transplant artificial organs to control these physical forces. Chapter 39. Self-mutation, body mutation, the combination of technology and martial arts, the use of internal energy to control basic physical forces, the pursuit of the direction of evolution of cosmic creatures, could be called a super-technological martial art. Of course, this was just an idea. Compared to artificial organs, genetic power was undoubtedly more suitable for the evolution of life. Chunong did not have any thoughts of becoming a cosmic creature. It was just that this kind of comprehensive experiment involving alien knowledge, interstellar medicine, and technology had piqued his curiosity as a researcher. After all, this world was vast, and there was no need to cause any unmanageable mess. Even if science and martial arts were rampant, there would be a Jedi Knight to clean up the mess. When the Force was at its peak, everything would be swept away by the Jedi Knight. It was a very suitable testing ground. Chunong looked at the equipment in front of him, his researcher's heart stirring. Combining learning and practice was the best way to understand the world, he comforted himself. When Anakin came to the captain's cabin and was about to say goodbye to his teacher, he was shocked to find a strange sand lizard crawling in a petri dish. This small reptile that lived in the sand dunes had a magical ability. It could flatten its body into a thin piece of paper to maximize the absorption of the sun's radiation. These little creatures that could survive without food were the most common creatures in the desert. Whenever there was a sufficient amount of food, they would multiply everywhere, even causing a disaster. Fortunately, Tatooine had never had a sufficient amount of food. Therefore, they were a famous invasive species on other planets, but on Tatooine, they were quiet and inconspicuous. But the sand lizard in the petri dish was completely different from the one Anakin had seen before. This small gray creature, about 10 centimeters long, was now an alarming blood-red color, and its body had expanded to more than a meter long. The sand lizard roared, its tail suddenly expanding, and its body shrank rapidly. but its tail was like a giant hammer, slamming heavily into the petri dish, and visible cracks appeared on the galactic-grade transparent material. The sand lizard's body continued to shrink, and its eyes became blood-red. A tiny thread that was hard to see with the naked eye shot out from its back, hitting the crack and breaking the petri dish in one fell swoop. The sand lizard's body expanded, and suddenly shot out, turning into a shadow, and crashed into Chen-Ong. Anakin hurriedly picked up the alloy cup beside him and threw it over. When it hit the sand lizard, it was like hitting an elastic rubber ball. Not only did it not hurt it, but it also increased its speed by 3 times. As fast as lightning, the blood-colored sand lizard had just pounced in front of Chen-Ong when he tapped its body with a finger. It slumped to the ground like a deflated balloon, and a large amount of water seeped out of its body and flowed on the ground. The giant sand lizard slowly shrunk to its original size, and its skin returned to its original gray color. It lay on the ground tiredly, letting Chen-Ong stuff it into another biological box. Anakin looked at the box that was weaker than the petri dish, and opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but he wanted to say something, but he wanted to say something. "Don't worry, that lizard can't do anything without water." Chen-Ong comforted him with a smile. Just now, Chen-Ong had done an experiment on this most common creature in the desert. He did not even transplant the organs of other creatures, but used the strange flexibility of the sand lizard's body. In the biological laboratory on the spaceship, there was perfect modification equipment. Chen-Ong easily implanted a layer of more flexible organic filaments under the sand lizard's skin. Using the quantum scalpel, he weaved a layer of biological protection net under the sand lizard's skin and moved its vital organs between the 2 layers of protection net. The final result was very optimistic. The sand lizard's magical ability was strengthened dozens of times, and with the protection of the protective net, few kinetic weapons could hurt it except for energy weapons. Chen-Ong even used an overclocking potion to unlock the potential of the sand lizard's brain. But this time, Chen-Ong consciously interfered with the process of strengthening the brain. He mainly strengthened the movement function of the sand lizard's cerebellum, and at the same time, improved the sand lizard's ability to control its body, so that it could use its abilities independently. A subbrain was fused into the sand lizard's brain. Using the subbrain programming technology of the interstellar era, Chen-Ong easily controlled the sand lizard's brain. He did not change the sand lizard's thinking program, but added some movement programs into its subconsciousness. With a thought, the brain could replicate this complex movement process. Some movement algorithms about fluids were replicated. One of them was a fluid movement program that used a large amount of fluid in its body to form a conductive structure when it was hit, and transmitted the force to other places. The other was a program that used the pressure resistance of the fluid to achieve the effect of amplifying and accumulating force. It was like there were dozens of hydraulic presses installed in the sand lizard's body, so that it could exert 10 times the force with just a wave of its hand. In fact, the fluid movement program still had a lot of potential to be developed. The turbine effect, the water pressure knife, and even the tension of pure water could all be applied to the sand lizard to achieve amazing results. This could also be considered a different kind of biological modification technology, but it was still far from the scientific martial arts realm that Chen-Ong wanted. If it was applied to the human body, it might be like a mechanical prosthesis, just an auxiliary mounting organ. It did not have much practical value. In the world of martial arts, being invulnerable and having the strength of a dragon and an elephant in every move was very scary, but in the interstellar era, it was only of little value. If it did not involve the potential of life, martial arts would have long been eliminated in terms of destructive power. But its excavation of the human body made it have a different value to Chen-Ong. In terms of pure destructive power, things like the Iron Man armor are worthless because science and technology are always a grand system. It is rooted in a world and formed in a grand production system. Every scientific and technological system is a deep-rooted tree, and its branches and leaves spread to all aspects. In this world, Chen Ong existed in the production system, and what he learned was just a drop in the ocean of interstellar civilization. With the support of production, it was true that many super technologies could be realized, but without this system, Chen Ong could not use a hammer to hammer out an anti-gravity engine. On Earth, even with the support of the entire human race, Chen Ong could not produce the simplest spaceship. Every time he transmigrated, the limited carrying capacity meant that Chen Ong could only keep his body, intelligence, and knowledge. Other than that, he could only look at the gains. Technology was meaningless to Chen Ong, because it had to be combined with a specific industry in order to have power. Only science has universal significance. It is the understanding of the world by intelligent creatures, and it is the wisdom that is worthy of praise. Anakin suppressed his curiosity and obediently came to Watson's grocery store with Chen Ong. Anakin, you ran out again. I'm telling you this time, no matter what reason you have, I will punish you severely. Watson struggled to fly 3 feet high and rushed in front of Anakin and shouted angrily, but he soon found Chen Ong behind him. He hesitated for a moment, left Anakin, and flew in front of Chen Ong. It turns out to be the famous mechanic these days, Watson said sarcastically. Most of the parts that Chen Ong replaced were imported from it, which was why Watson had not stopped Anakin. However, it did not have a good attitude towards Chen Ong, who was a profiteer who desperately suppressed the price and took advantage of its competition with its peers to wantonly take profits from it. Of course, when it encountered an exclusive business, Watson was not easy to deal with. It could take at least 80% of the profits from that business, but Chen Ong had mastered the technology of the channel, so Watson was always the one at a disadvantage. It was precisely because the two of them had similar business philosophies that they seemed to be incompatible. Watson flew shakily to the counter, and just as it was about to take out the latest list of goods, it suddenly noticed the uncontrollable joy on Anakin's face. It asked suspiciously, "Anakin, what's the matter?" "Watson, I want to redeem myself." Anakin stood in front of it and answered, full of vigor. Watson's face suddenly fell. He suppressed his anger and said in a deep voice, "I did say that you can redeem yourself, but the premise is that you have to work for me for 10 years without pay, and then pay your mother and you 10 times the value, and I will return you your freedom. 10 years is too long. I can't wait for my disciple to waste so long." Chen Ong said calmly. He took out a piece of black metal and placed it on the counter. "Or such a big piece." Watson reached out greedily to pick up the piece of metal, but it was unexpectedly snatched by a hand next to him. Seeing the wealth that was already in his hands being snatched away, Watson's eyes turned red with anxiety. "How dare you snatch it from me, slave?" Watson's spittle flew everywhere, and he excitedly stuck close to Anakin's face and shouted at him. "This is still not yours," Anakin replied in a deep voice. He calmly looked at Watson, who had lost his composure. Only then did Watson realize that Anakin was no longer a property that he could deal with as he pleased. With a gloomy face, he flew in front of Chen Ong. "This is far from enough. He is a good mechanic, and he can make a lot of money for me in 10 years. This amount of money is not enough." Chen Ong now had a large spaceship to maintain, and his wallet was like a bottomless pit. How could he satisfy Watson's demand? "No more. This is the most I can offer. If you dare to steal my slaves, I will give their identification to Jabba. That scoundrel will definitely be interested. You should know that Jabba has always been cruel. His slaves rarely live more than a year. Even if Anakin survives, his mother will definitely be tortured," Volto threatened angrily. "That's not going to happen. You dare to take away my slaves." Hearing this, Anakin could not help but show a nervous expression, but he was willing to believe in Chen Ong. Even though his hands were tightly gripping the corner of his shirt, he gritted his teeth and did not make a sound. I will compensate you in other ways, Chen Ong said slowly with a calm expression. Watson sneered. What can you compensate me with? Chen Ong looked at the twisted broken leg that was dangling in the air. One leg and countless money. Do you know how much money Sebulba earns in the shuttle race every time? Watson's eyes immediately lit up, and he said greedily, Countless. He wins every time, and everyone is betting on him. If he loses, how much can you earn from it? Too many to count. Watson's voice changed in excitement. He brought Chen Ong to the hidden backyard, and an energy shield enveloped the small area where they were. Are you going to do it yourself? If you are willing to build an unparalleled shuttle, I will definitely be able to find someone to drive it. When we win this race, that kid and his mother will be yours. Of course, you don't need anyone else. You can win by yourself, Chen Ong said in a deep voice. You have to show me the evidence. Watson's eyes widened a few times, and he panted heavily, but he did not forget to question Chen Ong. You will see it. The shuttle race is in 3 months. You have enough time to verify this point, Chen Ong said with a calm smile. Watson's face turned red and then purple. He was so excited that he flapped his wings even faster. He flew up to a height of 4 feet, circled a few times, and arrived in front of Chen Ong. He extended his palm and said, then, Chen Ong smiled and extended his palm as well. Chapter 40. Although Volta had reached a strategic partnership with Chen Ong, Chen Eng's trust in him was still maintained at a limited level. Volta's moral standards might be, as he claimed, far higher than the average standard on Tatooine, but Tatooine's moral standards were not at a high level. Volta could only say that they were not too bad. Something as important as the spaceship could not be exposed to him. Chen Ong could only use the instruments on the spaceship to build a complete human laboratory in Mrs. Smith's basement. Where did these things come from? No, you don't have to tell me. Volta was shocked by the silver-plated instruments as soon as he entered. His eyes could not help but stare at the nameplate of the instrument, and his mouth instinctively recited a number. Then, he hammered his heart with his right hand, feeling the thumping vibration. This was not an act. Volta was a Toydarian who had seen the world. When he was young, he had participated in the seasonal war on his home planet, Toydaria. He had seen with his own eyes the Star Destroyer cannons bombing planets, and the turbolaser cannons blowing up enemy ships. But it was one thing to see a grand scene. However, it was a completely different matter when he faced the dozen or so glittering golden instruments that were obviously very valuable. At that moment, Volta even had the urge to open his mouth wide and use Anakin to threaten Chen Ong in exchange for these instruments. Fortunately, the laser cannons beside him quickly calmed him down. Volta keenly noticed that the laser operating table placed in the middle of the laboratory was of a military-grade precision. This meant that this laser operating table could be used for taboo research, such as genetic experiments, live human research, and so on. In fact, the body modification surgery that Volta was going to perform today was also in the gray area of taboo research. Human modification surgery was difficult to distinguish from mechanical prosthetic. Moreover, so what if it violated the Galactic Republic's Research Act? The Galactic Republic even banned slavery. Tatooine did whatever it was supposed to do, didn't it? The ruler here was the lawless villain Jabba, not the Galactic Republic. Like the tens of thousands of remote planets in the universe, those with power were the boss. In the Galactic Republic, the separatist forces were getting stronger and stronger. Forcibly unifying the social concepts of tens of thousands of races was a difficult and unrewarding task. The undercurrents surging under the surface of the Republic were getting more and more agitated. Even within the Republic, there were voices of hawks who wanted to maintain unity with an iron fist. Volta looked at the prosthetic limbs that Chen Ong handed over. The limbs floating in the nutrient solution exuded a faint purple glow, which was very similar to Volta's skin. The prosthetic limbs were a right foot and a pair of wings. They looked very healthy, and there was nothing different about them. They were even moving slightly in the nutrient solution, as if they had just been plucked from a human body. Of course, Volta knew that this was just an illusion. Such limbs were cultivated directly. Generally speaking, due to excessive cell division, they would be a little fragile and old. This was also the reason why many warriors would rather use prosthetic limbs than cloned limbs. Lying on the laser operating table, Volta blinked at Chernong. "You have to keep me awake during the operation, or I will send out the signal immediately." "Wait, what is this?" Volta pointed to the purple liquid in the syringe. The overclocking agent lay innocently in the test tube, accepting Volta's questioning gaze. "You talk too much." Chernong, who had entered the operating state, was obviously different from before. Volta was very uncomfortable to find that Chen Ang's eyes had become a little cold, and his tone was a little impatient. The way he looked at him was cold without a trace of warmth. His eyes were stubborn and focused, and his state was very serious. "Wait, what's wrong with you?" Volta struggled violently on the laser operating table. When he saw the deep blue color in Chen Ang's pupils, he felt very scared. That kind of rational and cold state reminded him of the war robot. "You're not in the right state." "No, I don't want to do this operation. Let me go." "Let me go," Volta screamed. A pair of short hands slapped around. Looking at the syringe that was getting closer and closer, Volta pressed the signal transmitter in panic. Then, he was surprised to see that the transmitter was still green. It was supposed to make an ear-piercing buzzing sound and notify the mercenaries hundreds of miles away. But now, it was lying quietly in Volta's palm, as if nothing had happened. "No." Volta broke down. He slapped the signal transmitter in his hand and struggled to resist the approaching syringe, but it was useless. His body stiffened, and the purple liquid was still injected into his body. The deep blue color in Chen Ang's eyes had already expanded, and there was even a faint light emitting from his pupils. He controlled the laser needle and pierced it into Volta's spine, paralyzing him on the operating table. Volta's face was filled with extreme fear. Looking at its appearance, it seemed that its spirit was on the verge of collapse. But soon, with the transformation of the overclocking elixir, a deep blue color appeared in its pupils, and its body completely relaxed. The laser scalpel gently cut open its skin. In Chen Ang's hands, the scalpel seemed to have a life of its own. It jumped on Volta's body tissues and peeled off its nerves bit by bit. A gray nerve line that looked like a spirit snake was picked out by Chen Ong from the nutrient solution. It replaced Volta's nerves and connected it to its body. This kind of nervous system, which imitated the human meridians, was the latest result of Chen Ang's research on an alien creature called the Quiet Void Worm. This kind of Zerg, whose nervous structure and meridians were almost the same, was born with extremely keen reflexes. Chen Ong even imitated the mysterious radiation on Kreet's Dragon Ball to establish a set of heterogeneous internal energy system. The nerves easily fused into Volta's body, and even fused with the original nervous system. The overclocked brain was also controlled by the nervous system, and the rest was maintained at Volta's original level. This miraculous fusion ability was an unexpected gain of the internal energy system. Chen Ong still did not understand the reason. Ignorance must be verified. This kind of thing that could not be understood, of course, the first thing to do was to do experiments and understand it. Volta just ran into the muzzle of the gun and became the first subject of Chen Ang's science and martial arts system. When the blue light in Volta's eyes dissipated, it saw Chen Ong massaging his own head with a bitter smile. It could faintly hear the voice saying, "I lost control again this time. My condition is unstable." Volta inexplicably recalled its lost consciousness. It did not care about the signal transmitter that had been smashed into pieces in front of it. In its impression, everything went smoothly. Was it successful? It asked joyfully. With a thought, the wings on its back instinctively flapped. A stream of light flashed behind it, and Voltu suddenly jumped a distance of tens of meters in an instant. It was wrapped in electric light, and the high speed formed by the particle movement did not hurt it. This is... Voltu began to feel dizzy. It felt as if it could sense the surrounding magnetic field, and the wings behind it were like two particle engines that could easily cut through the magnetic field and obtain a super high speed. It seemed to be a little faster than twice the speed of sound. Electromagnetic abilities of living beings were rare even in the universe. The number of living beings on the planets that could have such abilities could be counted on one hand. Other than those living in the universe, most of the intelligent beings born on the planets only had weak bodies, and completely relied on technology to have the power to conquer nature. In the universe, only the Jedi Knights had the terrifying spiritual power that surpassed technology. During the Force Tide, the Jedi Masters could even use the Force to crush the planet. Therefore, the universe civilizations that clearly showed the law of the jungle would use the will of the Jedi to structure a relatively peaceful system like the Republic. For many of the weaker races, the magical evolutionary abilities of the living beings in the universe determined their status. No matter how nice the Galaxy Republic's words were, in many vast universes, people were still used to using strength to determine social status. Pirates and mercenaries were even more so. Even Volta's commercial status came from its psychic ability that was not affected by the Jedi's mind control. Apart from everything else, Tatooine was definitely a place where the strong ruled. The biggest expense here was the endless supply of weapons and food. If there were weapons, there would be food. For the people of Tatooine, a suitable weapon was everything. But what weapon was more reassuring than one's own body? Voltu was deeply excited. Although it was just a grocery store owner, it had to spend a large sum of money to hire mercenary groups to protect it in addition to Jabba's taxes. It knew very well what kind of price these mercenary groups would pay to improve their own strength. In any case, it was the kind that would not bear to use it even if it was beaten to death. The merchant's blood in its body was boiling, and it excitedly turned into a gorgeous halo of particles. In the blink of an eye, it circled the laboratory dozens of times before stopping in front of Chen-Ong. Its purple wings spread slightly, and Voltu floated in front of Chen-Ong, the magnetic field surrounding it to protect it. "I'll give you the identification of Anakin and the others now, but you have to allow me to do one thing. I want to show them this thing," Voltu said to him excitedly, already planning how to rip off those mercenaries. Everyone had been mercenaries for so many years, who did not have a few spare parts on them. Voltu dared to guarantee that those barbarians who relied on force for a living would use up their last copper coin to buy a combat prosthetic for themselves. Many of the destitute old mercenaries would even spend all their savings to buy this thing. Chapter 41. The Jedi Master, Qui-Gon Jinn, walked quietly in the small city. He followed the orders of the Jedi Supreme Council to mediate the conflict between the Trade Federation and planet Naboo. He was the most respected Jedi Master in the Star Wars universe. For the sake of peace between the two sides, he was now the protector of Queen Naboo. After Naboo was defeated in the war against the Trade Federation, the only hope of the Queen, whose crown was on the verge of collapse, was the Republic's mediation and support. In order to avoid the pursuing Trade Federation army, their ship's engine was unfortunately hit, and they had no choice but to temporarily dock on Tatooine. The respectable Jedi Master could vaguely feel that an urgent crisis was approaching, and the Force had led him here, as if waiting for something. Qui-Gon Jinn walked quietly on the streets, followed by his apprentice, Obi-Wan, and a servant sent by the Queen. He was very familiar with a remote planet like Tatooine, and he knew that it was easy to cause trouble here. He just wanted to find a suitable engine to replace and quickly leave. There was not much time left for Naboo. The Trade Federation was killing and plundering every moment on planet Naboo, and Qui-Gon Jinn's heart was burning with anxiety. Qui-Gon Jinn led them through the alleys, stopping from time to ask some local residents. He quickly understood that to find such an uncommon part, they could only hope to go to Volto's shop. Volto's shop has the most complete collection of parts here. If you can't find what you need there, then there's basically no hope. An old local grinned with yellow teeth as he replied with a smile. He said meaningfully, "Where is Volto's shop? As long as you're not blind, you can find it. If you ask me, you'd better get there early, or Volto will close up shop and go home. Or get caught by Jabba." The group left the crazy local, and Obi-Wan stepped forward and asked, "Teacher, is what he said reliable? The Force tells me that he is not lying or hiding anything," Qui-Gon Jinn said as he quickly walked to the front. The maid next to Obi-Wan frowned, a little unhappy. She complained in her heart, even if a crazy person like him isn't lying, his words might not be reliable. The few of them turned a corner, and immediately understood what it meant by "you're not blind." Dozens of mercenaries and pirates of different shapes and sizes were huddled together in a messy mess. Walter. The name was shouted several times in just a few minutes. These boorish men were either angry or impatient. A tall lizard man with a rough voice said hoarsely, "Watto, open the door. You have the courage to lock us out, and you also have the courage to open the door." "You're right." Someone in the crowd echoed, "Walter, you unscrupulous profiteer. Master's works are being monopolized by you at such a high price. This is definitely not the Master's intention. Walter, hurry up and open the door. We have money to buy your things." The crowd suddenly erupted into an uproar. They shouted Watson's name and even shouted in unison, "If you don't give us a chance to buy the Master's work, we'll smash the door." Smash the door. The crowd clamored. They held large pieces of stone and tiles in their hands as they crazily squeezed towards a broken alloy door. Obi-Wan saw this and wanted to go up, but Qui-Gon Jinn reached out and stopped him. Suddenly, the alloy door was violently pushed open. A horned man with a ferocious face strode out and shouted at the crowd outside, "What are you doing? What are you mumbling about? Do you want to die? Watto said that he doesn't have it today. Please come early tomorrow. Forget it, all of you." A trembling old Mocha man stood in front of him. He raised the iron hook in his right hand and pierced through the stone under the horned man's feet. "Come in, ma. You stupid customer, get out of the way. We're here to talk to Watto. Do you want to taste the power of my scythe hook?" The old man waved his steel hook, and a small alloy chain shot out with a high-frequency hook, grabbing through a piece of alloy plate dozens of meters away. A fist-sized plate was grabbed off. This kind of power caused the people around him to be secretly shocked. As expected of an old mercenary from Tatooine, he was already half a foot in the coffin, but he was still fighting on the battlefield. It was said that this old man could still go to the battlefield to kill enemies and go to the bar to pick up girls. He was indeed a wily old man. The bull-horned man snorted coldly. The broken horn on his head glowed faintly, and a stream of extremely fast particles blinded everyone's eyes. Looking at the bottomless black hole in front of Old Man Mocha, the people in the front couldn't help but take a step back, looking at the silver horn on the bull-horned man's head with both expectation and fear. The horned man looked around and seemed to be satisfied with their fearful expressions. "Beggars! Stay here obediently. The work of a master is not something you can afford, ha ha ha." He laughed as he stroked his silver horn and left proudly. Obi-Wan heard someone whisper, "What's so great about him? Wasn't he just a beggar who picked up trash? He was just lucky to buy a limited edition accessory. Now he's getting cocky. Quiet down. You can't beat him now." Obi-Wan looked back at his teacher with a solemn expression. Qui-Gon Jinn gave him a slight nod, then turned around and left. Obi-Wan followed, but he was very confused. The laser device on the bull-horned man was very dangerous and powerful. Such modifications were forbidden in the Republic. He did not know how someone here could make such a military-grade weapon. "The Force tells me that the laser on his head is alive. Just like the laser bugs in the spaceport. It's alive, Kagon Kim said calmly. Under his lead, the group turned here and there and approached Volto's shop from another direction. They arrived in front of the back wall. Kagon Kim pressed his hand on the wall and nimbly leaped onto it. He jumped into the yard and saw a boy about 8 or 9 years old standing not far away, looking at him in surprise. Kagon Kim felt a little uneasy when his force detection failed to detect the boy. He waved his hand to test the boy, but to his surprise, he found that the boy had an astonishing affinity with the force. The unknown feeling from the force detection was also telling him that this boy might be the son of balance. "Hello, little sir." Kagon Kim indicated that he meant no harm. "I just want to buy something. The front door is blocked." "Hello, master. This is Volto's shop. What do you want to buy?" Anakin asked politely. He was a free man now, but the cunning Volto had used some small favors to force him to work for another month, squeezing out his last bit of value. "What are you guys doing here?" Volto quickly scuttled over from afar. Kagon Kim's pupils shrank slightly when he noticed the electromagnetic wings on his back. Kagon Kim stepped forward and explained his purpose. Volto's face relaxed when he heard that he was not looking for the master's work. But when he heard that they were here to buy something, Volto's face fell again. "You're too late. My shop has changed its line of business, and the old goods have all been disposed of. Go. Don't sneak in again." Volto waved them away. But Anakin, who was beside him, said curiously, "His things have been mortgaged to my master. Is there something urgent? If time is tight, I can ask my master if he can sell you the things." Volto chased them aside in exasperation. He did not dare reprimand Anakin, so he could only glare at them and leave. "Can you introduce your master to us?" Kagon Kim asked as he bent down. "My master is very busy. Although he doesn't usually refuse requests, he rarely pokes his nose into other people's business. You guys should wait around here. I'll ask my master and get back to you," Anakin replied sincerely. "Do you have any way to contact him now?" The servant beside him interrupted. "We really have something urgent." "All right, I'll give it a try. But don't get your hopes up. I haven't seen my master for a few weeks. He's crazy busy, forgetting to sleep and forgetting to eat." Anakin turned around and went into the house. After a while, he came back out, puzzled. "That's strange. My master agreed to see you." He scratched his head and said to them, "Come with me." Chapter 42. Origin Power was the origin of the universe, the power of all things. Origin power was the creation of something from nothing, and something from nothing. Origin power gave birth to light and darkness. Light gave birth to all things, and darkness gave birth to something and nothing. Such a cycle was eternal. Believe it, and don't. It was all evolution, the ultimate game of life and death. The moment Kagon Kim met Chenong, he was astonished by the latter's boundless vitality. Kagon Kim had always believed that origin power was the embodiment of life, but he discovered another form of vitality in Chen Ang's body. It was as vast and boundless as origin power, but even more exuberant and full of vitality. It was a gentle and warm energy, different from origin power. This energy was pure in nature. It didn't even have any destructive power, and wasn't as sharp as origin power, but it was closely related to the origin of life. It could even be described as life. It was as though this energy was the embodiment of vitality. Kagon Kim even noticed the vibrant vitality origin power in Chen Ang's body. It flowed around him, nourishing and seeping into his body as he breathed. Vitality, origin power, and that mysterious energy interacted with each other, expressing a certain aspect of life. When Chen Ong saw Kagon Kim, he could tell that there was something different about him. He seemed to be one with heaven and earth, which made this gentle middle-aged man seem especially peaceful. His every move seemed to draw upon the will of the world. The vast and mysterious aura between heaven and earth was so dense that it was almost visible to the naked eye. In Chun Ang's perception, it converged on Kagan Kim's body, bestowing him with exuberant vitality. Both of them were pursuers of the domain of life. One was like a clear spring, surging with fresh vitality, while the other was like a growing ancient tree, glowing with the brilliance of the growth of life. The exchange of auras was even more powerful than words, causing the two of them to let down their guard at the first moment. "We are in danger, and we need your help. The dark forces of the universe have inevitably awakened again, and the power of the Jedi has fallen into a low tide. Peace is facing a threat, and the tranquility of origin power is about to be broken," Kagan Kim said slowly as he sat cross-legged in front of Chun Ong beside him. Obi-Wan couldn't help but feel astonished. He hadn't expected his teacher to reveal his intentions and the danger at the first opportunity. Even though the feeling of intimacy and trust from the origin power was one of intimacy and trust, the young Obi-Wan still couldn't bring himself to trust a stranger immediately. But the crisis is inevitable. It is only a manifestation of the will of reality. It isn't caused by one or two dark forces with ulterior motives, but the hatred, misunderstanding, and vigilance accumulated in the universe over millions of years. The weakness of the Republic isn't due to the destruction of the dark forces, but due to its own disease, Chun Ong reminded him. "Sir, that's not the reason why we're running away. All problems and contradictions need to be resolved. This time, our planet is facing a disaster, and we need to work together to overcome it." The maid of the Queen of Planet Nab, or rather, the Queen herself, could not help but refute. "What if you're working in the opposite direction? Your actions will only cause the conflict in the Republic to erupt even faster. You should know that war and division are unavoidable," Chun Ong reminded everyone meaningfully. Although Chun Ong could immediately remove Senator Palpatine's mask of hypocrisy, it was useless in the grand scheme of things. His power and influence didn't come from deception, but from the support of many factions. The Republic, which had been at peace for a long time, had suppressed the development of too many factions, accumulating a powerful opposing force. These forces were growing day by day, giving Darth Palpatine strong support. The Galactic Empire was not the hope of Darth alone, but the desire of tens of millions of influential figures. The enemies the Jedi Order faced were not only the Sith monarch, but also the peace-loving merchant groups, military enterprises, and even the well-dressed senators of the Republic. "The enemy is among us." This was not a joke. Even in the face of this, we still have hope. Kagan Jinn's expression was calm, and there was a light of enlightenment and liberation on his face. He spoke slowly. "Even on the eve of the descent of darkness, we should preserve the spark of hope and await the arrival of dawn." Chun Ong looked at him deeply, confirming that the Jedi Order could indeed use origin force to predict the future. The sacrifice of the Jedi Knights wasn't blind or ignorant. On the contrary, they were preserving the spark of hope for the new Republic. Chun Ong even had a malicious thought that perhaps the Jedi Order wanted to use this war to cleanse the universe of filth and filth. In any case, the Sith monarchs would die at any time due to the high tide of origin force, falling into the dark side of despair. The exchange of auras allowed both sides to communicate more smoothly, and Chun Ong didn't have to worry about anything. "You're in a dangerous situation. The pursuers of the Trade Federation have found your location, and a mortal enemy of the Jedi is approaching. If you wish to receive my help, you'll have to face a problem." "What is it?" The Queen of Neb couldn't be bothered to hide her identity. She stood up in a panic and asked hurriedly, "How do you know who we are? What's the situation with the pursuers of the Trade Federation?" Chun Ong ignored her question and looked calmly at Kagan Jinn. A ray of light shot out from his hand, and it was the image of the communication from the Neb royal family's airship, causing everyone to raise their guard. "I can intercept your communications, and so can the Trade Federation. Not to mention the mortal enemy of Jedi. They'll be here soon, and you don't have much time left. I'll ask for your help once more. This time, it's very urgent." Kagan Jin stood up and looked sincerely at Chen Ong, the origin power on his body emitting a gentle fluctuation. Chen Ong was silent for a moment, then he looked up and said, "As you wish, Great Master." Kagan Jin smoothly obtained the PL-4 engine from Chen Ong. The Queen of Neb took the R2 and D2 robots to the airship for emergency repairs, while Kagan Jin and Obi-Wan stayed at Chen Ang's place, waiting for an opportunity. Origin power is a mysterious energy field scattered throughout the Milky Way galaxy. All living things produce origin power. Everything in the universe is permeated with the will of origin power. Microplasmas are microscopic life forms that coexist in the blood of living beings. They are the medium between organic life forms and origin power. Kagan Jin stood in front of Chen Ong. Chen Ong raised his hand and waved his sword horizontally, making an inviting gesture to Kagan Jin. The two stood together on the energy platform, facing each other with rapt attention. Chen Ong slowly raised the blade of light in his hand and held it horizontally in front of him. Qi is the energy of life that originates from breathing. It mobilizes the potential of the body through the appropriate breathing method, reaching the realm of harmony. All things are formed from Qi, and Qi gives birth to all things in harmony. The human body is the universe, and the universe is the human body. Qi is the basic energy of life, and it is also the umbilical cord between man and the universe. The root of origin power and inner force lay in their foundation. Breathing and meditation. One was to develop one's potential through breathing, which surged with the source of life. The other was to experience oneself, feel everything, communicate with the force field of origin power, and come into contact with the source of life. Although the two came from different cultures, their origins in life were the same. The shocking affinity between the undergarments and origin power allowed Chen Ong to sense the vast origin power aura of heaven and earth very quickly. However, there was always a thin barrier between him and the aura. It was as though he was looking at flowers through a fog. He could clearly sense it, but he couldn't mobilize it in the slightest. Chen Ong took a deep breath, knowing that he was missing a crucial link in origin power cultivation. Microplasmas. On the other side, Kagan Jin's perception of inner force was also in a difficult position. He couldn't understand the meridians. They couldn't be seen or touched. But there was an aura transfer system. Soon, Chen Ong was able to show the characteristics of origin power. After all, life origin power was just another form of expression for him. He couldn't feel the unified origin power, be it light or dark. He could feel the vast power surging outside his body, and he could feel the same power inside his body. But there was no bridge between the two. The microplasmas existed in every living creature in this universe, but it was a mystery to an outsider like Chen Ong. If he couldn't solve the problem of the microplasmas, then the power of origin power couldn't be opened to Chen Ong. Although the life origin power had brought Chen Ong a great surprise, the unified origin power was the true essence of origin power. Kagan Jin looked up and met Chen Ang's eyes. The two smiled at the same time, raised the light blade in their hands, and condensed their spirit outside their body, communicating with the breath of heaven and earth. Two equally profound auras mixed and tested each other. Chapter 43. As far as Anakin could remember, there had never been a better day on Tatooine than today. Even though the blazing Gemini sun was still shining brightly in the sky, it did not burn his skin. A gentle breeze blew past, and there was no dust on his skin. He quickly made his way through the crowded streets and alleys of Mos Espa. He no longer had to fear those ferocious galactic smugglers. Only when the fresh morning air hit him in the face did he realize that he was free. He was far away from Watto and its little shop, far away from the unbearable past. Only when he passed by the stacked huts of Mos Espa did he relax his footsteps and look at it sadly. All his friends were there, and they were all slaves as well. Sometimes, when he had to face his fate, he could only look at it sadly. Just like the little girl named Ami and her mother a long time ago. Very quickly, Anakin quickened his pace and sprinted towards his home. Smith was waiting outside his house. She had her hair tied back and adorned with some silver metal ornaments. This added some color to her face. She was usually dressed simply, but today she had a beautiful smile. "Anakin, slow down," she said with a smile. "There's no need to be in such a hurry to move. But you're here, I'll be worried about you." Anakin looked at her seriously, an indescribable fear in his eyes. Smith's heart was a little bitter. She pressed his head into her arms and said softly, "It's okay, it's all in the past now." Shmi could clearly feel his fear. His life on Tatooine was not as comfortable as it seemed. Ever since Anakin had gained consciousness, he had been deeply afraid. It was the fear of being separated, and also his attachment to her. This fear reached its peak when he was 7 years old, and they almost lost each other. "It's okay, Anakin. You have the courage to protect me, don't you?" Smith studied his face and said softly, "Go buy some fruits? I heard your teacher has guests." "Yeah. 2 Jedi Knights. They have lightsabers on their waists. It's the kind you know." Anakin's eyes were filled with anticipation as he jumped down from her arms. "Then I'll go first." He sprinted like a young deer. Whenever he encountered smugglers or mercenaries looking for trouble, he would reveal the hilt of the light blade at his waist so that no one would be stupid enough to stop him. "I want to protect myself, and I want to protect my mother." Anakin still remembered what he had said to Chen-Ong a few weeks ago. "My power will protect those I cherish and do the right thing." "You're doing very well." Chen-Ong praised him, and then gave him a brutal beating. "But you need true strength. Of course, you also need wisdom. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so stupid as to say such things now." Anakin remembered being knocked to the ground without being able to fight back. Chen-Ong held the wooden sword and said to him, "The more capable you are, the more responsible you are. Your sense of responsibility is so great that you must be in desperate need of power. Now, get up and practice this swordsmanship 300 times. This training was not useless. At least now, Anakin was fierce enough to scare off thugs looking for trouble. His lightsaber was also sharp enough. But Chen-Ong said to him, "You lack killing intent." Anakin asked for guidance on how to gain killing intent. Chen-Ong replied, "When there's a helpless fear and sorrow in your heart, and a kind of anger that makes you wield your sword for love, you will naturally have these. It's not that you're not decisive enough, you just lack some experience. Some experience that will make you more determined to wield your sword." Anakin quickly took a sweet fruit from an old woman. Suddenly, he heard a commotion behind him, and even the sound of a woman crying. "What's going on?" Anakin asked curiously. There was a faint sense of unease in his heart, as if the scene from 3 years ago was replaying itself. "Slave hunt." The old woman hurriedly packed up the stall and told him, "Hurry and find a place to hide. Those damned interstellar pirates are here again. They have guns and suppressors, and they can capture whoever they want. Many people have been kidnapped like this before, and their families have never been heard from again." Anakin broke into a run. He was as fast as a leopard, flying toward his home. Along the way, he saw many scenes of suffering, but as someone who was always willing to help others, he did not dare to stop. An indescribable fear gripped his heart tightly. Just around the corner of his house, he saw something that made his heart explode. It was a small silver hairpin that had been on his mother's head just a moment ago. "No!" Anakin screamed. His vision began to blur. He rushed toward his cozy little home and looked around frantically. Everything seemed to be intact, except for a warm shadow. His most precious thing had disappeared without a trace. "Mom!" He could not help but shout, angrily raising the hilt of his lightsaber as he stood at the door and shouted, "Run, Anakin! Your mother has been taken by Jabba's people." Hurry and find someone to save her. His neighbor, Tt Clanella, stood at the door and shouted at him. A tall, ferocious-looking creature suddenly grabbed her by the hair and threw her to the ground. Look! I found the fish that escaped the net. Ha! With a ferocious smile on its face, it carried a ferocious alloy knife and walked toward Anakin. Anakin's eyes were cold, so cold that it made him feel uneasy. He raised the hilt of the sword in his hand with trembling hands. Irrepressible anger and regret surged in his heart. When your heart is filled with powerless fear and sorrow, when there is a kind of anger that makes you wield your sword for love, you will know what to do. Chen Eng's instructions made him snap the last string in his mind. The blazing lightsaber in his hand swung out with unprecedented decisiveness and determination. He remembered Chen Eng's teachings, and the lightsaber in his hand struck the weakest part of the alloy knife. Using shock and energy, he forced it to reveal an opening. Then, he attacked like a storm. The lightsaber drew an arc, and with Anakin's roar, it cut off the limbs of the pirate. Blazing energy swept across the limbs. Anakin picked it up and grabbed it in his hand. One of the alloy claws stopped in front of the pirate's eye socket. "Where did you take my mother?" The pirate howled and did not answer. Then, it received an even more terrible treatment. The intense pain woke it up abruptly. "They went to the gate," it screamed. Anakin dropped its body and swung the lightsaber in his right hand, cutting off the pirate's head. He glanced apologetically at Tt Clanella. After seeing her stand up, enduring the pain, he hurried to the gate. Along the way, tears flowed from his eyes. She might disappear without a trace, she might be injured or killed, she might be afraid now. These thoughts of fear were too much for Anakin to bear. He could only grip the lightsaber in his hand tighter. Until he saw that figure, that warm and familiar figure. She was in the crowd, violently shoved by the mercenaries. For a moment, Anakin saw the clear fear on her face. The shock made him unable to move. He had never seen his mother fear. To him, she was always the symbol of calm. For a moment, she revealed all the fear of her life to him. When she saw him, the crazed look in her eyes disappeared, replaced by a deep sense of worry and heartache. "Go!" she mouthed to him silently. But this time, Anakin did not listen to her. He pulled out the lightsaber in his hand. Surrounded by the crowd, he approached the group of pirates. The worry in Shmi's eyes deepened. Her anxiety seemed to overflow her brows. She tried her best to signal him with her eyes, but she could not do anything. Step by step, he approached the crowd. Shmi suddenly closed her eyes and charged at the pirates with determination. She attacked them viciously. "No!" Anakin shouted. He could not watch her sacrifice herself like this. A large hand pressed down on his shoulder, and a familiar voice rang in his ear. "I once taught you how much power you have, and how much responsibility you have to bear. You don't seem to take it to heart." Chapter 44. Zla. An electric sound rang out, and the high-speed vibrating cyclic frequency alloy blade was placed horizontally in front of Shmi. The one-eyed pirate smirked as he viciously swung the brass knuckles on his right hand towards her head. He laughed heartily and casually teased his companion beside him. "Who does this stupid woman think she is? She can't be sold for much anyway. Let me chop off her head and show those restless pirates." Anakin's face paled. He ignited the lightsaber in his hand, but Shmi was too far away. He couldn't even run to her side in time. The pirates laughed heartily, their faces twisted with excitement. They were excited for the blood and violence to come. They cheered for it, and Anakin's pale and despairing face was reflected in their cheers. A small buzzing sound rang out, and the lightsaber quickly split the alloy blade in half. Kagan Jinn walked out from the side and carefully stood in front of Shmi. At that moment, Anakin slumped to the ground in shame. He covered his mouth and burst into tears. "You must always remember this moment. Remember your regret and courage. The former makes you wise, and the latter brings you murderous intent and strength," Chen Ong whispered in his ear. With that, he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, and his body leaped in an almost impossible manner. Like a withered leaf, he drifted to the center of the pirate. The lightsaber in his right hand spun and produced 3 blazing white flowers. Chen-Ong moved with strange and ever-changing steps. The pirates who stood in his way were all easily killed by a blazing particle blade. The bandits who stood in a mess were separated by him in a neat straight line, like a sharp blade cutting through the waves and a waterline on a calm water surface. Finally, some pirates discovered him. Someone's attacking. Kill him! Several pirates pulled out their blades and rushed toward the two, trying to stop their feet so that the others could react and finish them off together. The pirate who rushed toward Kagan Jin couldn't block his sword, and was cleanly cut down by the lightsaber. However, more pirates shot at him from afar, and more people rushed forward. In the distance, a black-skinned, 4-armed man licked his lips in excitement. "Kill them!" he shouted, his eyes flashing with a cruel light. "I want to tear that woman apart in front of that kid." On the other side, Chen-Ong, who had used his inner force to protect his body, nimbly jumped to a height of several dozen meters. The silver disc in midair became his leverage, and the sword light that was as fast as a swimming dragon seemed to casually pass through a few alloy blades that were waving at him. As the blade light flashed, it easily separated the bodies of a few pirates. The silver disc floating in the air became the best leverage for Chen-Ong, helping him to complete the impossible move. He could always appear at any place in the blink of an eye. He expanded the battlefield of the confrontation, his body always skimming through the air. The pirates who raised their blasters were often cut down to the ground in a flash. Kagan Kim shielded Shmi as he approached Anakin. With a light flick of his lightsaber, he deflected the beams of light shooting at them, protecting the 3 of them securely. "Your teacher is very scary." Kagan Kim glanced at Chen-Ong worriedly, then turned to Anakin. "His swordsmanship is calm and full of efficiency. He is always moving at high speed. His grasp of timing and judgment always allows him to swing his sword in the impossible. This kind of swordsmanship is like the fangs of a poisonous snake, cold, calm, and deadly. But he is a rational person. His heart is filled with calmness, like a windless lake. He can control it with ease. He does not swing his sword with hatred, but you are different." Anakin clenched the lightsaber in his hand with a complicated expression. In front of him, 2 dismembered corpses showed what had happened. Kagan Kim's calm voice still reached his ears. "Chen wants you to swing your sword with emotions because he knows that you need to vent your emotions, not suppress them. But you must know how to control yourself. The anger in your heart is because of love. Love can help you control yourself. Chen wants me to tell you that your principle is..." Anakin lowered his head and tried his best to avert his ashamed gaze. "To kill with caution," he murmured. "You did not do this. Killing makes you unable to control the lightsaber in your hand. Use love to subdue the anger in your heart. You should be firm and careful when killing. Chen is a very good teacher. He discovered the hidden hatred in your heart. You should face the darkness," Kagan Kim said earnestly. He pulled the stone off his chest and passed it to Anakin. "Chen feels that you're the son of the Origin Force and will be a key figure in affecting the balance of the Origin Force. He wants me to teach you to stay away from the dark side of the Origin Force and not go crazy over it. He teaches you that strength drives responsibility, wisdom guides the path forward, principles cannot be violated, and killing with caution. You should subdue your heart. May the Force guide you." Kagan Kim gave him a blessing and placed the pebble from the river of time into his pocket. Anakin carefully accepted Kagan Kim's blessing. He bravely picked up the lightsaber and rushed out of Qui-Gon's protection. This time, he used the love in his heart to guide the suppressed anger. Origin power fluctuations appeared on his body, and the lightsaber was like a sharp sword. He swung, blocked, and slashed, blocking the alloy blades coming at him from all directions. Anakin adjusted his breathing with the breathing method Chen Ong had taught him. Relying on his short stature, he leaped around the pirate's feet, calmly stabbing out with the lightsaber in his hand. Accompanied by sharp slashes, several pirates fell to the ground one by one. On the other side, the battle was still going on. Chen Ong was like a terrifying black tempest, bringing death upon everyone. He flickered through the battlefield like a ghost, killing with each step he took. His efficiency was terrifying. In a short period, the number of pirates who had fallen to his lightsaber had broken through the dozens and was rapidly approaching the triple digit. The corpses on the ground had all been killed with a single slash. There were no other wounds apart from a charred wound. The pirates were on the verge of collapse. One of the pirates could no longer endure the atmosphere. With a loud cry, he threw down his weapon in an attempt to escape. A beam of light flashed past as the alloy blade pierced through the back of his head and emerged from his mouth. The four-armed man pulled out the alloy blade and flung the corpse away. Whoever dares run will die. A biting cold killing intent stabilized the pirates' footing. Although they were at a loss, they still obeyed the burly man's commands and formed a defensive circle. Take Shmi and leave first. Wait on the airship, Chen Ong said to Anakin as he efficiently dealt with the last pirate who had run away. Seeing the hesitation in Anakin's eyes, he smiled. Go. Trust me. Kagan Kim stepped forward and stood shoulder to shoulder with him. The two faced the circle of swords formed by the pirates, their expressions calm and serene. Chen Ong pulled out a second lightsaber and held it in front of his chest. His breathing was steady and powerful as inner force slowly flowed through his body. He closed his eyes slightly. No need for passion. Calm the mind. Do not follow the ignorant. Follow the true knowledge. Do not indulge in lust. Remain calm and clear. There is no destruction, only the power of origin. Kagan Kim silently recited the creed of the Jedi Knight as he slowly held the lightsaber in front of his chest. When Chen Ong opened his eyes again, his pupils were a deep, dark blue. The blazing white blades in his hands brought with them a stream of light. Chen Ang's body turned into a streak of white light as he flashed through the air and landed in the circular formation. The four-armed man's face was malevolent and cruel. He roared and activated his energy weapon without a care for anything else. A dense net of light enveloped all directions. Every pirate that came into contact with it was struck by a burst of electricity. They screamed miserably and fell to the ground. The ground around them exploded into countless clouds of smoke and dust. Wherever Chen Ong landed, there was a lightning-like laser beam striking the spot where he stood. The dense lines of light enveloped the sky and formed an inescapable net in all directions. The four-armed man smiled savagely as he gently waved the four alloy forks in his hands. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of something from the corner of his eye. His heart skipped a beat as he muttered to himself, "Not good." Two hazy beams of light suddenly lit up and shot over with an unfathomable trajectory. Kagan Kim could feel the origin power around him cheering as it revolved around the indistinct voice in the smoke and dust. Like a meteor crashing to the ground, one of the beams streaked across the sky and exploded heavily in front of the four-armed man's chest. The man looked as though he had been struck by a hammer. A thin layer of light rose up from his chest like an eggshell, protecting him. Energy barrier. Kagan Kim frowned as he looked at the fallen man, feeling somewhat worried. The blade in Chen Ang's hand was only a modified civilian cutting device. It wouldn't be able to break through the barrier's defenses. Kagan Kim swung his blade to evade the approaching pirates, and was about to step forward to help him with his lightsaber. However, the actual situation stopped him in his tracks. The two blades in Chen Ang's hands unfolded smoothly, the flowing radiance forming two perfectly closed semicircles. The first slash had just been unleashed, but the second was even more powerful. An unending stream of light fell upon the energy barrier, stirring up small ripples. "Ha ha! It's useless." The burly man clambered up from the ground and fished out his blaster while enduring Chen Ang's torrent of attacks. Chen Ang's method of wielding the sword immediately underwent a subtle change. The edge of the blade shifted from a different angle and brushed past the energy barrier. The violent vibrations transmitted into the barrier and caused the burly man's heart to go dizzy and his footing to falter. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, the radiance of the blade grew brighter and brighter. Under the burly man's incredulous gaze, the two beams of light merged into one, breaking through the thin energy barrier and gently brushing past his body. The broken energy splendor sprinkled down from the sky. The four-armed man could only see a white light in front of him. His arms were the first to turn into ashes, followed by his shoulders, chest, and both legs. Blazing white light leaked out from his body. Flying flames covered his entire body, turning it into ashes bit by bit. Chapter 45. When the blade of light exploded, Chen Ong came into contact with the origin force for a brief moment. This did not surprise Kagan Jin. The Jedi were not the only group with origin force sensitivity. Chen Ong had the right and ability to come into contact with the origin force. But the truth hidden beneath this was very shocking. Not only was Chen Ong not a origin force sensitive, he did not even have a Qianjin. He was like the Yuzhen Vong, an existence that was isolated from the origin force of this universe. He should not, and could not, come into contact with the origin force, unless the nature of the origin force was not what everyone had guessed. The relationship between the origin force and the Qianjin was not as close as everyone had thought. Chen Ong tried to feel the origin force, but found that although the barrier between him and the origin force had weakened, it was still like a thick layer of glass. He quietly channeled his inner force, and found that the nature of the inner force was even purer, even tainted with a trace of the characteristics of the life force. This was very normal. Life origin power and inner strength were both the embodiment of a certain aspect of the origin of life. It was natural for them to imitate and fuse with each other. Chen Ong was almost certain that inner strength could transform into life origin power. When the inner force and the origin force were fused, what could stop him from communicating with the origin force? The Qianjin could be a bridge to communicate with the origin force, and the life force could naturally do the same. When the inner force and the life force completely overlapped, the unified origin force would also open its heart of tolerance. All life had origin force. The origin force did not refer to the Qianjin, but the expression of the origin of life. Anyone could communicate with the origin force. This was the main idea of the life force, and Chen Ang's change undoubtedly reflected this. Chen Ong opened his palm. There were some small scratches on it, left behind when he tried to control the origin force. Usually, Chen Ong only needed to control the muscle groups at the nerve endings to temporarily hide the scratches, but this time he had a better choice. He channeled his inner force slightly, and an inexplicable aura quickly approached Chen Ang's palm. When he opened his palm, the broken capillaries on his palm had already healed, and the delicate skin was as smooth as jade, without any visible wounds. Origin healing. This was the first origin skill that Chen Ong had simulated, and it looked like the effect was not bad. The healing properties of inner energy were not inferior to life force at all. Coupled with Chen Ang's Grandmaster-level medical skills, it could be said to be successful in every endeavor. With Chen Ang's superb control of his body, even a severed limb could be regrown. Of course, the effect would be much worse if it were used on someone else. It was used for a run. You're being chased by the Trade Alliance, and I'm being chased by Jabba's bounty hunters. If we stick together, I'm afraid the risk will be doubled, Chen Ong said with a smile as he picked up the useful items on the ground. Before Kagan Kim could answer, the communicator on his shirt rang. Obi-Wan's anxious face appeared on the communicator. Our ship has been destroyed by the Trade Federation. Force warned, the king said. They're warning our force of call. It doesn't matter. Come and meet us here. Chen-Ong interjected lazily. There are pursuers behind us. Obi-Wan turned around anxiously. He could see dozens of ferocious-looking flying cars hovering behind him. Queen Naboo's guards were providing cover, obstructing their pursuit in an orderly manner. Before Obi-Wan could explain, a domineering voice came from behind Qui-Gon Jinn. Let them come. 111. Don't worry. Chen-Ong held his alloy blade upside down as he stared at the rising dust in front of him. Behind him was a group of old cripples in their 70s and 80s. Their bodies were riddled with wounds and they could hardly breathe with just a single step. Among them was a paralyzed old man who sat in a hover wheelchair as he floated in front of Chen-Ong. The electronic voice on his chair asked rigidly, "This time, the boss is going to pay more. The mechanical army of the Trade Alliance is a tough nut to crack. You'll have to give us a price 3 times higher." Chen-Ong slapped open the door of the shuttle behind him and pointed at the dazzling array of weapons. "These are all for you. Look carefully. Take as much as you want. Not to mention 3 times the price. I'll give you 3 times the price." He clapped his hands hard and said rudely, "There are also some small things. You'll definitely like them." Watson flapped his wings and floated behind him coldly. "It's all your fault. It's all your fault. The shuttle competition hasn't even started, and you've already messed with Jabba's basket. Now you're giving out free goods. Don't you know that these things are enough to buy 10 lives for each of those useless people? I'm one of them too. You can stay. I didn't force you. Just consider these things as your ticket." Chen-Ong shrugged his shoulders indifferently. Watson's face turned purplish red. He said angrily, "I don't want to be turned into jerky by Jabba or fight with that evil beast of his. Remember, you're the one who violated our contract. You have to bear all the responsibility. The one who owes the debt is the boss. Have you ever heard of this saying?" Chen-Ong distributed the weapons and said to Watson without looking back, "If you don't want to lose everything, you'll have to work with us honestly. Otherwise, you won't get a single cent." Watson was speechless. It was not that he did not want to refute, but he had just recalled the battle record of the man in front of him. He had single-handedly killed more than 100 interstellar pirates under Jabba's command. Such a fierce person was not someone he could afford to provoke. He must have been blinded by the power of money. Otherwise, he would never have dared to say such a thing. The crippled old mercenaries worked together to break open Watson's treasure chest. More than a dozen crystal-clear petri dishes were quietly placed in the chest. A few egg-shaped organisms, like beating hearts, fluctuated slightly in the petri dish. The ferocious appearance of the organisms and the mysterious aura of science made the veterans not dare to act rashly. Chen-Ong held up the electronic telescope and observed the line of smoke on the horizon from afar. "Hurry up, we don't have much time left. Obi-Wan and the others are fighting and retreating at the same time. It looks like they have suffered a lot of casualties. But how do we use this thing?" A K2 with a broken limb used his bare tentacles to roll up one of the petri dishes and asked in confusion. "Press the red button, and when the red light shines, just throw the thing on the ground." Chen-Ong answered as he pulled out 2 spare light blade handles from behind him and inserted them behind his waist. The K2 pressed the red button curiously, and a blood-colored solution was suddenly injected into the petri dish. The egg-shaped organism inside trembled violently, and gray nerve threads probed around in the petri dish. When the petri dish turned completely red, the red light suddenly lit up with an ear-piercing buzzing sound. The K2's tentacles trembled and retracted like lightning, letting the petri dish fall to the ground. The sturdy material that could withstand large amounts of lasers shattered like glass all over the ground. The egg-shaped organism in the petri dish sprang out, and the gray nerve threads were exposed to the air. As everyone held their breath in anticipation, it suddenly turned around and pounced on the K2. "Ah!" The K2 screamed, but the egg-shaped organism easily inserted the nerve tentacles into its mouth. The egg-shaped organism that pounced on its face melted silently and wandered around its body. The K2 twitched, rolled his eyes, and fell to the ground, his body twitching. The crippled mercenaries around him all took a step back and looked at the K2 carefully, for fear that something would happen to it. Super Martial Awakening, Unseal Como. Chun-Ong gave orders to the biological weapons on the K2 through the communicator. Electric wires and machinery flashing with electricity drilled out from the deepest part of the oval-shaped creature and sank heavily into the kata's body. A surging thing drilled in and out of the kata's body like a snake, and flesh-colored tentacles emerged from the broken roots of its tentacles. Limb regrowth. The crippled old mercenaries looked at this scene in shock and whispered to each other. Electric wires flashing with blue light spread along the tentacles to the end, and a powerful magnetic field emerged from its body. A small box that Chun-Ong had put aside suddenly opened on its own. Inside were neatly placed nail fragments. The nail fragments floated in the air. Sensing the magnetic field released by the electric wires, they quickly stuck to the tentacles and formed a steel whip-like tentacle. Like an outer armor, they protected the tentacles. Blue electric light spread on the tentacles, and the steel tentacles with long metal thorns began to spin rapidly as the magnetic field changed. The K2's unconscious body twitched instinctively. The 2-meter-long tentacles and the outer armor floated in the air and stretched to nearly 10 meters long, plunging into the rock like a drill. As the 4 or 5 steel tentacles waved, the electric light and kinetic energy shattered everything larger than the size of a fist within 10 meters. Its eyes lit up with a blue light, and it jumped up from the ground. With the power of the magnetic field of the tentacles, it floated in the air. The dangerous and ferocious tentacles swam around it like snakes. The K2 opened its eyes in confusion and looked at the people far away from it in confusion. "What's wrong, guys? What's going on?" None of the mercenaries who were close to it paid attention to it. They all used every part of their bodies to drag, pull, pinch, and pull as they desperately squeezed in front of Watson's box. The paralyzed old mercenary's wheelchair had a large blaster floating in it, and it was pointed at the people in front of him. The stiff electronic voice said hurriedly, get out of the way, or I'll shoot, or I'll shoot." The K2 stared dumbfounded at the old bastards who had used all their abilities. They watched as they used all their dirty tricks for a petri dish without any regard for their feelings. In front of Chun-Ong, dozens of small balls floating in the air shot out. They flashed with a blue electromagnetic field and shot out rapidly. A blue-white electromagnetic beam wrapped around them and shot into the dust in the distance. After a while, a strong electromagnetic storm swept over from afar. The communicators on the mercenaries and Kagan King exploded in black smoke and were completely charred and unusable. The few robot carriers floating in the air at the front fell and crashed into the sand dunes. Queen Naboo and the others were like a line of small black dots, quickly approaching this place. Chapter 46. The cold mechanical flood slowly approached. Tens of thousands of war robots hung on the military airship. The huge airships came crashing down from the sky, covering the mountains, rivers, the sun, and the moon. In the air, the mechanical soldiers fell from the airships like dumplings. The thousands of mechanical soldiers on the ground gathered into a torrent and pushed forward. On the other side, the guards of the Naboo royal family led by Obi-Wan were in a sorry state. They were hiding under the desert, and the 4 sand drilling vehicles were traveling at a depth of tens of meters under the sand dunes. Obi-Wan was leading dozens of guards, using all the weapons they could think of to stop the mechanical army. From time to time, guards in uniform would be shot down by lasers. Along the way, the broken robots and the corpses of the Neb guards fell. To the robots, it was just a drop in the ocean. However, the guards suffered heavy casualties. The tall royal guard captain hid behind the boulder, the blaster in his hand continuously firing. He turned around in despair and said to Obi-Wan, "Warrior, please protect Her Majesty's safety. She is Neb's only hope." As long as the Queen is safe, our sacrifice will be worthwhile. Don't think like that. You have to hold on. Reinforcements are on the way. Obi-Wan held his lightsaber and waved his hand to deflect an ion beam that was shot at the guards. He turned around and looked at the guard sincerely. There won't be any reinforcements. Mr. Warrior, you don't have to comfort us. When I joined the guards, I already had the resolve to sacrifice myself for the Queen. Every one of us brothers and sisters has the determination to die for Nebraska. The guard captain stopped retreating. He led the remaining guards and maids to stay where they were. One of the Queen's closest maids turned around and said to Obi-Wan, "Protect the Queen and retreat. Mr. Jedi, we will hold them off for a while." There was a strange brilliance on this petite girl's face. She stood under the sun, the hair in front of her forehead reflecting the sunlight. Her clear eyes looked at him devoutly and said, "May the Origin Force be with you." Obi-Wan looked at this ordinary-looking girl and the many guards who had stopped beside him. He held tightly to the creed in his heart and gave his blessings to his exhausted comrades. "May the Origin Force be with you." The particle beams that shot towards Obi-Wan did not scare him at all. He waved the light sword in his hand agilely to protect himself. He weaved through the rain of bullets and felt the expectant gazes of his nameless comrades behind him. He killed his way towards the Queen. These Cold War machines had logical judgment and thinking abilities that were not inferior to that of ordinary humans. They were remotely controlled by the troop carriers that hovered high up in space. The steel tide that could destroy everything pushed forward little by little with a cold, murderous intent. Even though his guards fought with all their might, their comrades still fell one after another. Obi-Wan could even feel their despair and resistance. He felt the burning sensation of the particle beams brushing past his face. He endured the anger that was about to burst open in his heart. He tried to tell himself that their sacrifice was worth it. He tried to forget those silent faces and advance towards the Queen. But when he was about to reach his destination, he could not help but look back. It was still that nameless maidservant. Her hair fluttered beside her ears, and there were beads of sweat on the tip of her nose. She stood in the middle of the battlefield, focusing her attention on the front. In front of her was an endless army of machines. Scarlet-red lasers brushed past her face a few times, but she just stood there without moving. Only when a few accurate lasers shot towards her did she calmly close her eyes. Obi-Wan trembled as he lifted the muzzle of his blaster, trying to redeem everything. He turned his head in despair. He could not bear to see what would happen next. He could feel sweat dripping down his forehead and cheek. Then he saw a familiar figure. It was as steady and tall as a boulder, standing in front of everyone. "Leave the rest to us," a voice said. Obi-Wan raised his head and saw Chun-Ong standing in front of him. His teacher, Kagan Kim, was standing in front of everyone, blocking most of the threatening attacks with a lightsaber. Under the heavy night sky, stars shone behind them. Obi-Wan could see those lights clearly. They were old flying shuttles, full of strange-looking warriors. These old warriors were old enough to be Obi-Wan's grandfathers. Their bodies were emitting a murderous aura. Their clothes were tattered, and they were wearing strange equipment. They looked especially ferocious. Amidst the endless yellow sand, none of these warriors could ignore them. It was a kind of eye-catching aura that could not be concealed, and neither could they be bothered to conceal their menacing fangs and brandishing claws. They were exposed in the center of the battlefield. A Katu with floating steel tentacles was the first to pounce. On the battlefield, 2 straight gray lines were spreading through the robot array. The 2 lightsabers in Chun-Ang's hands flew and cut down everything in front of him. The sharp lightsabers easily cut through the sturdy alloy shells and cut them into 4 pieces. A condensed and calm aura flowed out of the lightsabers. It was as if the world had turned gray, and the lightsabers in his hands were the only bright spot. When Obi-Wan saw this, a trace of confusion flashed in his eyes. Then, he was reminded by the vigilance in his heart, and he paid close attention to Chen Ang's crazily increasing threat ability. A silver-white glove was clasped on Chen Ang's elbows, and two buzzing silver plates floated near Chen Ong. Blue lightning flashed on the lightsabers. His highly focused mind gathered on the two lightsabers, and he felt the frantically beating energy aura. If inner strength was the path of inner cultivation, Chen Ang's development of it could not be said to be profound, but it had been expanded to the extreme. No matter how inner strength was used, it was still developed and used the strength of the human body. It was harder than steel, faster than bullets, and it was still bound by the physical body. It had to be reflected in the real world through the physical body. Chen Ong suspected that the so-called unity of man and nature and the vitality of heaven and earth might be the application of inner strength to get rid of the physical body's restrictions and independently interfere with the world. However, this realm was far from Chen Ong. In this regard, Chen Ong had always been looking forward to the appearance of a turning point. This kind of power that directly interfered with reality, the great power that directly affected physical forces without using the physical body, Chen Ong had once thought that it would be a special ability, a path of martial arts that used special abilities as the first driving force and integrated inner strength. He did not expect that he would find a way out in the science of the interstellar era. Electromagnetism, sound waves, fluid, photon, gravity, these physical forces that were bound by science had a common source of interference, the origin of all things, the great power of life, the origin force. Although unifying the origin force was still far away for Chen Ong, the nature of the origin force of life could already trigger the power that interfered with physics. Through some high-tech equipment, the path of science and martial arts sprouted for the first time. The electromagnetic traction beam rings on his wrists and the anti-gravity engine in midair were rough and extraordinary. In that instant, Chen Ang's entire body was wrapped in lightning, like a ball of lightning. He stepped on the air, and his figure flashed like lightning across the sky. The lightning that entangled his body, under the guidance of the silver-white gloves, roared and surrounded his body. His footsteps did not touch the ground, but his figure was wrapped in blazing white lightning, sweeping across the sky above the mechanical army. Two light blades wrapped in a huge amount of electromagnetic ions turned into giant blades that were several meters long, like the wings of lightning. Under Chen Ang's extreme speed, all the ions that approached him were turned into plasma and shot out along the light blades, maintaining the fragile stability of the lightning ball. The invisible particle light blades cut through the space countless times in an instant, like the right-angle ripples blowing across the water surface. Countless intersecting sword lights flashed in the mechanical army. With the unique physical properties of particle weapons, every time Chen Ong swung his sword, there would be tens of thousands of light-frequency vibrations. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of thousands of particle blades had swept across the battlefield. Like hot knives cutting through butter, they dismembered the machines in their path and turned them into piles of rubble. Obi-Wan watched in shock as the lightning flashed past. His hand holding the light blade had unknowingly become drenched in sweat. He couldn't believe Chen Ang's miraculous swordsmanship. There were no origin power fluctuations, no tidal oscillations, and only a weak interference of vitality origin power had produced such a terrifying display of swordsmanship. It was as though Obi-Wan could see a new door of origin power slowly opening, and a sensitive organization that could sense vitality origin power was rising. Just as he was feeling uneasy, his teacher, Kagan Jin, had arrived at his side with the escort squad. His teacher, Kagan Jin, had already escorted the guards to his side. Seeing Obi-Wan's distracted look, he frowned and said, "Obi-Wan, don't let the world blind your eyes. You have to learn to see the world with your heart. Look." In the distance, the old soldiers were staggering on the ground as they charged fearlessly toward the mechanical army. The old men with one foot in the grave formed a stark contrast to the cold and merciless mechanical army. Chapter 47. Plasma sprayed out from the tentacles. The Catus flew in the air. Their slender steel armor, which was hundreds of feet long, lashed out with dark blue electric light at the nearby living beings. The Catus extended their tentacles toward the mechanical army and slowly pinched them together. An invisible magnetic field wrapped around the robots and made them float in the air. As the tentacles in the air suddenly curled up, dozens of robots were turned into scrap metal by the exploding magnetic field. The trembling old mercenaries stood in a row and faced the tens of thousands of steel soldiers in front of them. They looked relaxed, as though they were not facing a bloody battle, but the warm afternoon sun. The paralyzed veteran excitedly lifted his wheelchair. The black chains on his limbs were attached to his hemp, rod-like limbs. These half-dead old men had their backs to the horrified Nabu guards as they calmly waited for the mechanical army to approach. The dark-skinned old man in the lead had a light yellow cigarette in his mouth. He took a deep puff, flicked his index finger, and lightly flicked the cigarette out. The spinning cigarette but landed on the ground hundreds of meters away. The dark-skinned old man took out 2 modified blasters from his back. He held them in both hands and watched the approaching mechanical army with cold eyes. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, until a foot stepped on the cigarette butt. In that instant, time seemed to stretch out for a long time. The atmosphere in the field suddenly changed from extreme stillness to extreme activity. The old men, who had been dying a moment ago, suddenly pounced forward energetically. The dark-skinned old man moved with both hands, shooting wherever the beam of explosive energy particles pointed. He moved nimbly between the beams of light, and his 2 hands steadily and methodically opened fire. Although his speed was not very fast, every shot would paralyze a robot. Not a single one missed. The fatal beam of light swept past the tip of the old man's nose, but it did not cause the slightest ripple in his eyes. His eyes were as deep as a pool of stagnant water, and the young Neb guards were dumbfounded. The old people around him, who had 1 foot in the grave, walked through the rain of bullets as if they were taking a stroll in a courtyard. More than 10 guns were fired in an orderly manner, and the pressure they created was actually comparable to that of tens of thousands of mechanical troops. The paralyzed old man tilted his head, a blaster floating in front of him, specialized in shooting elite robots. These old ghosts were born on the battlefield, grew up on the battlefield, and would die on the battlefield in the future. They had honed their skills in the sea of blood, and they also had sharp senses. They smiled, as if they were greeting each other in the morning, and smashed the robot's head. Seeing a few elite units covered in energy shields among the robot army rapidly approaching, Black Leather, the paralyzed old man, and the others threw away the blasters in their hands. Their faces were calm as they stood empty-handed at the front. The K2 were the first to lose control. With a wave of its long whip, its tentacles immediately stretched out dozens of meters and wrapped around an elite robot. Its body was pulled by the tentacles and quickly approached the robot. On its arms, 2 plasma turrets suddenly wrapped around its arms, easily breaking through the energy shield and sinking deep into the robot's core. The dark-skinned old man pressed his right hand slightly to the ground, and his body suddenly soared into the air. The surrounding robots were quickly attracted to a core above his head, and an incomparably huge distorted suction force controlled at least thousands of robots present. The long gravitational line distorted space, causing the robots to slide down bit by bit and squeeze into a ball. The K2 exchanged glances with him, and several tentacles suddenly danced. A huge plasma ball formed beside it, and a huge magnetic field protected the K2, distorting all attacks against it. Suddenly, the K2 released its control over the plasma ball and watched the huge energy monster slide along the twisted space toward the bunched robots. In the air, a dazzling firework suddenly exploded, flashing across half the sky. People dozens of miles away could see it clearly. Several old mercenaries formed a small team. The paralyzed old man floated slightly in the middle, and a huge concave ring floated under his control. He lay in a wheelchair, His head drooped, and his right eye was a metal prosthetic eye that reflected a faint red light. The others maintained the complex ring structure. Chirp! A huge red beam of light pierced through the sky and pierced into the center of the steel army. A huge scorch mark extended from the front all the way to the horizon. Along the way, the robots that collided with each other exploded one after another. In the center of the battlefield, a large area was cleared. Before the mechanical army could catch its breath, several more old mercenaries pounced on it. Sharp ion light blades and explosive laser beams crisscrossed the battlefield. As more and more people joined the battlefield, more and more strange prosthetics showed their abilities. The robot army was like wheat in a field, being harvested one by one. This is... The Queen came out of the underground car, and saw that the two sides were in a deadlock in the sky and on the ground. "Your Majesty, do you want to pay for these weapons?" Watson appeared out of nowhere. Electromagnetic dragon whip, planetary energy, crimson laser eyes, wild sand. "Your Majesty, these are all very useful materials for war. Even if you don't need them now, for the sake of peace, you will need them one day. I will not let my people pay for these killing weapons." The Queen rejected him. Watson was not angry. He put down the list and sneered. "But Your Majesty, these killing weapons are now saving you and your people." It pointed at the fiercest part of the battlefield and grinned. "The weapons that you look down on are actually fighting for peace, and the people who talk about peace are compromising with evil and war. Who is the evil one?" On the transport robot airship, Chun-Ong stepped on the silver disc and leaped into the air. Hundreds of meters in the sky, the strong wind provided him with an endless amount of leverage. Chun-Ong glided in the sky, as agile as a swallow. He stepped on various flying drones and slashed at them with the light blades in his hands, tearing apart their weak armor. Withstanding the shocking pressure, he quickly approached the sky. The more spacious the place, the more complicated the lasers he had to avoid. After the drones had enough strategic depth, they brought him a lot of pressure. The silver disc was like the most agile swallow, cleverly avoiding the net and flew higher and higher until it was thousands of meters in the sky. Chun-Ong stepped on the air, his body shook, and he flew more than 10 meters up. The light blades in his hands formed a closed circle. The silver-white handguard released a large amount of electric charges, attracting the ions in the sky. More than 10 jumping electric lights appeared beside Chun-Ong. They were attracted to the two ends of the light blades according to the positive and negative ions. The spinning light blades formed a circle of electricity. With the help of the electromagnetic levitation force field, Chun-Ong flew in the sky until a lightning bolt as thick as a bucket struck down from the ionosphere. The effect of the Faraday cage created a huge electric current around Chun-Ong. It attracted the electric charges in the sky and continued to release them. The impact of the lightning broke the balance of Chun-Ong's electromagnetic field. He fell from thousands of meters in the sky. More than 10 lightning bolts entangled him like ferocious dragons. One after another, they struck around Chun-Ong's body. The huge electric ring, with the light blades as the core, formed an all-like electric fluid. His internal energy and life force tried their best to maintain this dangerous balance. As the friction became stronger and stronger, Chun-Ong, who was falling from the sky, had already become a moving body like a lightning bolt. The light blades trembled and rotated. Suddenly, more than 10 sharp particle beams shot out from the lightning in the sky. The sharp light blades cut through the protective cover of the airships in an instant. Violent electric currents swarmed up and tore everything inside. Like a blooming lianhua, lightning bloomed among the airships in the sky. The pouring electric currents, guided by the high-energy particle beams, pierced into the protective cover of the airships and tore everything inside. 2 airships that had luckily escaped the disaster crashed into each other under the disturbance of the electromagnetic field. A fierce fire broke out and burned. After everything was settled, Chun-Ong stood in the center of the room, standing on the silver disk. On the ground, the robot army that had been defeated had suffered the impact of the electromagnetic field. Without the airship's signal circulation, their reactions had become extremely slow and they were killed by the veteran mercenaries. Chen Ong landed beside Kagan Kim and looked at the queen who was walking toward him. Although the queen had won a glorious victory, her brows were still furrowed. Neb's situation is getting more and more dangerous. I can't wait like this. Either give us hope, or let me go back to my people. Obi-Wan hurried over. Your Majesty, please calm down. Our airships have been destroyed. Only by contacting the airships that took off from Tatooine can we reach the Republic's territory. Then how long do we have to wait? The Queen looked at him unceremoniously. Wait until my people are all slaughtered? Wait until Neb is reduced to nothing? Kagan Kim did not participate in their argument. He turned to look at Chen Ong. The airships are on their way. Chen Ong said with a smile. Where? The Queen did not hold back. Chen Ong raised his head and looked at the horizon. There was a slight tremor coming from the ground. Under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, a small hill slowly rose in front of them. A huge object slowly rose from the ground, and hundreds of millions of tons of sand and stones fell from its body. A huge crack appeared on the ground. Chapter 48. This was a ship with a bit of history. Queen Padme thought to herself as she looked at the streamlined golden hull under the sunlight. The ship's elegance and simplicity could not be hidden at all. It was like a work of art from the end of time and space, intoxicating one with its rich sense of history. Such a ship should have remained on the display shelves of the interstellar tycoons, becoming their favorite collection. Those nouveau riches who flaunted their culture would go crazy for it and become its loyal followers. Padme found it hard to imagine that there would actually be people who would use such a well-preserved ancient ship as a means of transportation. It would look as crazy as chopping vegetables with a lightsaber. Due to its age, the ship's tractor beam was the oldest gravitational type. It projected a gravitational field that pulled the Naboo convoy into the main entrance of the ship. Anakin jumped down from the ship excitedly and ran to Chen Ang's side. Teacher, are we leaving? Yes, we are sending the Queen and the 2 Jedi to Coruscant. You are also going to the Terminus Temple to train, Chen Ong said with a smile as he put away the lightsaber in his hand and stepped on the silver plate. Say goodbye to Tatooine. You might never come back here again. Anakin looked back with a complicated expression. This desolate and bleak planet. In his memories, warmth and cruelty, happiness and humiliation had all happened in this place. Now it was time to say goodbye. No need, teacher. Wherever you and Mommy are, that's my home. Chen Ong shook his head with a smile. I'll be leaving for a while soon. I've entrusted Keegan to take care of you during this time. You'll be studying in the Holy Temple of the Jedi Warriors for a while and cultivating origin power from him. Anakin looked up in shock. Why? Teacher, where are you going? To train. Chen Ong smiled. The origin power has given me a lot of inspiration. I will be training outside for a while. It is not suitable for you to follow me now. Anakin, you are still young and need to build a good foundation. The Terminus Temple is where you will be studying from now on. Go and greet Qui-Gon Kim. But Anakin wanted to argue. Go quickly. Chen Ang's tone was gentle, but there was an unchangeable determination in it. He picked up the 2 light blades beside him and said with a smile, I want to welcome a new friend of ours. Anakin lowered his head and walked over to Kagan Jinn. Kagan said something to him, then patted his head and walked over. I thought you'd stay in the Holy Temple. Why did he have to leave? I will apply to the clan of elders to let you become a teacher of the temple, and enter the temple to learn. You clearly have the chance to come into contact with the truth that you want to seek. Why are you rejecting it? You must help me keep this opportunity. Of course, I'll come back to continue cultivating and exploring origin power, but sometimes, the closer we get to the origin of things, the more shallow and ignorant we feel. I realized that my understanding of life is not deep enough. This is preventing me from continuing to search for the truth. Chun-Ong gently flicked his fingers, and Kagan Kim felt the rhythm of the origin power. It was a life aura that he had never felt before. He seemed to see the other side of the origin power, or rather, the side of life that was different from the origin power, a hot land of origin power that he had never explored before. Is this another kind of life force? Kagan Kim sighed. It's truly magnificent. It's weak but tenacious, small but vast. I feel another great existence in it that is not inferior to the origin power. It and the origin power are two sides of the same coin, and together they explain the mysteries of life. If you can't understand it more deeply, you will definitely be rejected by the origin power. I understand your choice. I will suggest to the clan of elders that you become a non-staff Jedi Knight. I hope you won't refuse, Kagan Kim said solemnly. It would be my honor. Chun-Ong smiled and accepted his invitation. Let's go. Don't let our Sith friend wait too long. A mysterious figure in a black robe slowly appeared in the distant horizon. Kagan Kim's expression was solemn as he and Chun-Ong slowly approached. The black-robed man lifted his hood, revealing a lofty face hidden in the shadows. His scarlet and black facial patterns intersected, and his cold golden eyes made him appear cold and merciless. Darth Demon's silence filled the air with the scent of blood. He was like a silent predator in the night, dangerous, cold, cruel, and proud. Pure evil. Chun-Ong could even feel the pure aura of the darkness side of the origin power on him. It was deep and profound, vast and cold. He was even purer of darkness than Sidious, and had even lost his own will. This made him even more dangerous. A faint buzzing sound rang out. In Darth Demon's hand was a long red lightsaber. The surging energy blade was violent and dangerous, and the aura was abnormally violent. In Darth Demon's hand, it emitted a sinister aura of darkness. Darth Demon leapt up, his origin power leaping technique making his body incomparably agile. The red lightsaber in his hand turned into a rapidly rotating turbine, slashing down at Kagan Kim. Sigh. Kagan Kim ignited his lightsaber, calmly blocking the blow at the last moment. The violent energy of the lightsaber rubbed against Kagan Kim's blade, and the vibrating origin power in the field, under Darth Demon's control, pressed against his chest. Kagan Kim could feel the abnormal flow of origin power around him as he struggled to cope with the immense pressure brought by the origin power. He brandished his lightsaber, resisting Darth Demon's incomparably violent sword technique. Darth Demon's sword technique seemed to be wide open, the sword light dazzling and incomparably sharp, but the most terrifying part was the unpredictable rhythm and trajectory of the lightsaber. The lightsaber danced in the air, drawing out dazzling arcs of light. The seventh form of the lightsaber technique was swift and violent, and in Darth Demon's hands, its might was far beyond imagination. Coupled with Darth Demon's perfect telekinesis technique, the sword light scattered out, layer upon layer, like a monstrous wave. Kagan Kim's origin power foresight could not even see the trajectory and landing point of the lightsaber. He could only rely on his skilled swordsmanship to deal with Darth Demon's attack. The lightsaber in his hand was steady, protecting himself without a single gap. Although he looked a little ragged, he was actually dealing with it calmly. Chun-Ong slowly drew out two lightsabers, crossing his hands. Arcs of light flashed in the air, and the blazing white light of the energy blades cut through the air like a white rainbow piercing through the sun. Under the dual vibrations of internal force and life force, the quivering lightsaber, sharp and austere, flashed past a screen of light, and in the blink of an eye, it pierced into Darth Demon's back. Suddenly, Darth Demon's body seemed to be pulled, and with a swift turn, his body leaped into the air. He ignited the lightsaber on the other end, and his wrist moved at an extremely high frequency. The sword light rotated, and drew out hundreds of overlapping sword circles. The twin-headed lightsaber was exceptionally sharp, and in Darth Demon's hands, he was able to deal with both Chun Ong and Kagan Kim at the same time. Under these sword shadows, there was hidden killing intent, and the combination of illusion and reality with origin power made it impossible to defend against. Boom! The arcs of light were like a taut bowstring, suddenly exploding with extreme speed. Under the intersecting of the lightsaber, hundreds of blade lights scattered out, crisscrossing against Darth Demon's lightsaber. The stirring sword light was reinforced by Chen Ang's full strength, and suddenly swelled forward, crushing Darth Demon's sword circle. Kagan Kim's sword shadow also accurately coordinated, piercing towards Darth Demon's vitals. Without hesitation, Darth Demon disassembled the twin-headed lightsaber, and the two lightsabers intersected with each other, blocking Chen Ong and Kagan Kim's sharp swordplay. The indestructible lightsaber forcefully collided with Chen Ang's lightsaber, and the condensed ion beam became unstable under the impact of the lightsaber. Chen Ong had no choice but to avoid a direct confrontation with Darth Demon. A dark shadow suddenly pounced out from Darth Demon's body. Kagan Kim's expression was solemn, and he withdrew his sword, weakening the dark shadow. Darth Demon's lightsaber expanded rapidly, forcing Chen Ong to retreat. In the blink of an eye, Darth Demon retreated dozens of steps. He looked deeply at Chen Ong, and then slipped into the darkness. Kagan Kim slashed his Force Phantom, and looked at Darth Demon's receding figure with a heavy heart. Sith, it really is them. The ancient dark shadow has appeared once again. I must inform the Jedi Elder Council of this news. Chen Ong looked at the almost useless lightsaber in his hand, and shook his head with a bitter smile. What an indestructible lightsaber! Just now, Darth Demon's origin power skills and swordsmanship had opened his eyes, but what gave him the biggest headache was the instability of the lightsaber. Sith's lightsaber was sharp and violent. If it wasn't for Chen Ong avoiding a direct collision, the lightsaber would have long since been destroyed. Of all his abilities, he couldn't even display 60% of his full potential because of his weapon. It seemed like he really needed a new weapon. After Sith retreated, Kagan Kim didn't dare to stay any longer. There had to be two Sith, one master and one disciple. He couldn't guarantee that he and Chen Ong would be able to deal with two Sith at the same time. Queen Padme, who was worried about her country, was restless. Under her urging, the ship quickly set off. Flying at superluminal speed was fast and fast, but in the vast universe it still took a long time. It took 3 long months to travel from Tatooine to Coruscant. Chen Ong was in high spirits as he learned about the Naboo's science, and discussed origin power with the 2 Jedi Knights. This wondrous and profound knowledge made him immersed in it. When they arrived at Coruscant, Chen Ong even felt a little regretful. Kagan Kim brought Anakin to the Jedi Elder Council, and the ancient research ship was also entrusted to the Naboo to repair and maintain. Chen Ong looked around at this prosperous planet, and his figure gradually disappeared into the air. Inner force transformed into the origin of life, the origin of life gave birth to life force, and the origin of life guided and unified origin power. If Chen Ong wanted to explore the mysteries of origin power, it would only be possible if he traced his inner force back to the origin of life. The Star Wars world could no longer help him. The next time he came here, both light and darkness would definitely open their hearts to him. Chapter 49. That day, that night, Jiang Hu finally remembered the fear of being once dominated by the imperial court, and the humiliation of being bound by the law. In the dark night, the knights stepped on the puddles and galloped into the unknown darkness. The sound of breathing in the wilderness grew heavier and heavier, more and more concentrated. A low sob suddenly rang out in the darkness, but it was immediately covered by someone's mouth. He stumbled and stumbled as he ran on the plains. The bright moon hung high in the sky. All of a sudden, the fleeing crowd stopped in their tracks. They stared blankly at the nightmarish figure in front of them. Under the moonlight, several knights in flying suits were standing there quietly. They were like ghosts and ghosts in hell. A trace of despair flashed across their faces. A young woman fell to the ground and cried in a low voice. The man in the lead pulled out the long saber at his waist and laughed in despair. Zhao family dog. I, Wang Batian, will not let you go even if I die. Under the moon, the light of the saber was like frost. It reflected the cold light like blood. Blood splattered into the sky, like a long red ribbon hanging down from the moonlight. Run! Run! The men protected the woman behind them and shouted at a young man. Wang Batian's body fell heavily in front of the knights. One of his head was in the hand of one of them. His 2 eyes stared at the young man. The young man turned around and left with tears in his eyes. Behind him, the angry roars of the men and the wails of death could be heard. There was only one voice that kept ringing in his ears. Run! Run! Go find gang leader Qiao and ask him to uphold justice for us. The young man sped up. The branches in front of him hid his face and left a few bloody marks. But he only knew how to run. He exerted all the power in his body and used all his strength. There was nothing in his mind. He only knew how to run forward. He left the wind, the moon, and the killing behind him. Kill all the hawks and dogs of the imperial court. I'll fight you eagle claws to the death. The men roared. The men roared, but they still could not suppress the cold voices of the knights. The Taihang Wang family village has robbed passers-by and caused trouble. In the past 30 years, they have committed dozens of murders. Their crimes are unforgivable. Family head Wang Jindao has already been executed last month. The emperor has ordered the imperial guards to capture the fugitive. Imperial governor's orders, Dark Dragon Guard, kill. Kill! The knights shouted in unison. White mist rose from the armor on his body. Under the charge of the mount, he looked like a ghost. A man wielding a large saber leaped with all his might, and the saber light swept across the knight's body. Molten fire as armor, lightning as blade. Dragon roar, tiger roar, black tortoise true technique. The knight's red cloak fluttered in the wind, and the thick mist around him suddenly turned fiery red. Rising and leaping like flames. The man blocked the long saber with all his might, but he was always stuck 3 inches in front of the knight, unable to get any closer. Facing the knight's cold gaze, he closed his eyes miserably. Another head soared into the sky as the blazing light rolled past. In the dark night, the blood light soared to the sky. In the apricot forest, Qiao Feng's body was stabbed several times. He shouted heroically, "Who killed Vice Gang Leader Ma? Who stole my folding fan and tried to frame me? I will get to the bottom of this." He then turned his head to Kong Min. "Madam Ma, with my skills, if I wanted to take something from your mansion, I wouldn't return empty-handed, and I wouldn't lose anything. Not to mention that there are only 2 or 3 women in your mansion. Even if I wanted to take something from the inner court of the imperial palace, the commander's tent, or among thousands of soldiers and horses, it's not impossible for me to take something." "Qiao Feng, you chitin dog thief, you're still talking nonsense, slandering Madame Ma's clean reputation. Vice Gang Leader Ma is upright and outspoken, and it was you who killed him. Brothers of the beggar sect, how can you let this evil thief go?" The atmosphere in the surroundings instantly froze. Everyone present was at a loss. The beggar sect disciples instinctively wanted to obey Qiao Feng, but because of his identity, they did not dare to express their support. At this time, a figure in a sorry state rushed out from the side. They saw a travel-worn, wounded young man at Qiao Feng's feet, crying loudly, "Qiao Feng, you have to uphold justice for our Taihang Wang village. I asked Qiao Feng to investigate the blood feud of our entire clan. Investigate." He pounded his head like garlic, crying incessantly. Qiao Feng awkwardly said, "Little brother, it's not that I want to make things difficult for you, but I really can't bear the title of beggar sect leader. If you don't mind, I'm just one person, but I also want to seek justice for you." The young man cried loudly, "The Jianghu is in danger, how can we care about trivial matters? Xiao Feng, the northern Wulin, is finished. Finished. Hearing this, the heroes present were all shocked. Dan Jing stepped forward and hurriedly asked, "Is it the Khitan invasion?" Xiao Feng's face showed that he was in a dilemma, and his steps suddenly slowed down. He thought to himself, the heroes of the Wulin fight to protect the country, but if I go up now, what position will I be in? The young man's next words shocked everyone. "It's the Imperial Court. The Imperial Court has attacked the Wulin. The Red Knights, those Red Knights, they are the Imperial Court's dogs, under the Imperial Edict of the Emperor to attack us. Our entire Wang village has been killed, and the next target is the beggar sect." "Don't talk nonsense." Elder Su pointed at the young man's nose and said angrily, "Everyone knows that the beggar sect is loyal to the Song dynasty. Many beggar sect heroes shed their blood and shed their lives in the war against the Liao dynasty. How can you talk nonsense here?" The Minister of Revenue, Kai Jing, was killed by someone with the dragon-subduing palm at home. The Emperor is furious, and has established the Imperial Guard, the Suwu Hall, to control the Jianghu forces. The Suwu Hall's governor, Chen Ong, is cruel, merciless, and cold-blooded. He actually issued 36 Suwu decrees, using harsh laws to control the northern Wulin, and if anyone disobeyed, the whole clan would be slaughtered. The young man took out a bloody letter and read it in a choked voice. He knelt on the ground and cried, "This is the blood and tears of the northern Wulin." Less than 3 days after the order was issued, the traitor Chen personally led his men to besiege and kill the heroes of the 18 stockade villages of Taihang. Even the cult master of the Ming cult, Fang La, was hunted down by him for more than 300 li. Our northern Wulin is in a storm of blood, and our families have been destroyed. Please uphold justice, gang leader Qiao. Why didn't the local beggar sect disciples report such a serious matter? Elder Su scolded angrily, "That's a load of nonsense. Xiao Feng, is this someone you found to deceive people?" "I'm telling the truth. Beggar sect disciples, according to what I've seen along the way, all the beggars have been forcibly imprisoned by the government. They say that they don't want to farm, and they've been forced to farm." The young man cried, "Nonsense, nonsense." Elder Su was so angry that his beard fluttered. He pointed a trembling finger at the man. "How can the Great Song have fertile land to farm? It's Western Xia. The Western Xia army suffered a great defeat and suffered heavy losses. They've already lost Hutao and a large area of the northwest. The king of Western Xia is so scared that he ceded his land and begged for peace." The aristocratic martial artists present had been suspicious at first, but they couldn't help but laugh when they heard this, as if they had heard the funniest joke in the world. Elder Su was also so angry that he laughed. "You madman, madman! Men, drag this man away! You've really lost your mind." The young man struggled and shouted, "I'm not crazy, not crazy. Gang leader Qiao, you have to uphold justice for me. The Imperial Court has really acted against the martial world. The Dragon Stallion army of the Suppression Martial Hall is already coming for the beggar sect. Gang leader Qiao, you have to be careful. Be careful." Elder Su laughed. "This man is really crazy. The Imperial Court has been cowardly for so long, and now they're saying that they've defeated Western Xia? What nonsense!" The crowd in the apricot forest couldn't stop laughing. Everyone knew that the Song army was weak. The Liao people and the Xia people were all acting like tyrants in the Imperial Court. Although the Great Song dynasty was prosperous and healthy, its military was lax and its military strength was weak. None of the people present looked up to the cowardly Imperial Guards. They even looked down on the border soldiers. When they heard this, they found it funny. It sounded like a fantasy. Amidst the laughter, the sound of hooves could be heard. There were horses galloping from the north, followed by a few sharp whistles. Some of the beggars present whistled in response. The horses galloped faster and faster, gradually getting closer. Elder Su murmured, "What kind of emergency is this? they saw a beggar disciple lying on a horse. When the horse galloped to the front of the crowd, it let out a long neigh and fell to the ground dead. Xiao Feng hurried forward to help the beggar disciple up. He saw that his face was pale and his breathing was weak. Elder Su pointed at Xiao Feng and said sternly, "Xiao Feng, this is an important matter for the beggar clan, you can't interfere." Xiao Feng let out a long sigh and handed the disciple over to Bai Shijing, who stepped forward to support him. Unexpectedly, the disciple clutched tightly onto the corner of Xiao Feng's clothes, his lips trembling as if he wanted to say something. Seeing this, Elder Wu coldly snorted, "What is the meaning of this, Elder Su? Chief Qiao is our chief, why can't you listen to him?" The disciple was speechless and pointed behind him with a trembling finger. He didn't know when, but a group of riders in red had appeared on the path he came from. They wore red flying fish robes and were lined up in 2 neat rows. A slender figure stood at the top of the hill with his back facing the crowd. The hem of his green robe fluttered in the breeze. His unbound hair fluttered in the wind. He had a majestic aura. When the disciple saw the figure, he gasped for breath and his face turned red. He was so excited that he fainted. Xiao Feng carefully handed the disciple over to Bai Shijing and cupped his fists at the figure. His actions were dignified and free, giving the beggar clan disciples a sense of confidence. He asked in a deep voice, "Who are you? Why have you come to our beggar clan's gathering place?" That person flicked his sleeves and turned around. When the crowd saw his face clearly, they discovered that he was just a young man with a crown on his head. However, his aura was actually not inferior to Qiao Feng's. Everyone present felt a slight pressure pressing down on them. Wang Yuyan furrowed her brows and said, "This person's aura is similar to cousins, but when compared to cousins, it feels different." She originally wanted to say neither fish nor fowl or monkey crown, but she felt that it would belittle Murong Fu too much, so she quickly changed it. Duan Yu, who was beside her, noticed her strange behavior and asked, "Fairy sister, what's wrong?" Wang Yuyan looked at Duan Yu. Although Duan Yu looked like a fool now, his bearing was engraved in his bones. This person is more like him, but he's a little too infatuated. Duan Yu was born in a noble family. His behavior and upbringing were exactly what Murong Fu wanted to emulate. However, one was raised with bearing while the other was learned. Compared to Duan Yu, Murong Fu's bearing was clumsy. Chen Ong was no longer the ordinary student he used to be. He led a huge financial group in the endless world and had honed his bearing, so he looked more like Duan Yu. Duan Yu looked back and found him familiar as well. He smiled and said, "This brother has an extraordinary bearing. It seems like you're someone worth befriending." In the apricot forest, the crowd stared at Chen Ong with burning eyes. The atmosphere was solemn and heavy. Chen Ong smiled and said, "I'm Chen Ong, Commander-in-Chief of the Imperial Army from the Great Song Suwu Academy. Greetings, Gang Leader Qiao. P.S. This was supposed to be a speech at the end of the Star Wars volume, but I didn't write it well and was too embarrassed to say anything, so I might as well put up a preview of the new volume. Writing the plot as a preview was also a great experience for me. This plot doesn't affect the main plot of the demigods and semidevils, so it doesn't matter if you don't read it. Anyway, when I write Apricot Forest, I'll definitely use the main character's perspective. There are 2 more chapters today, so in order to prevent the starting point from going crazy, I'll try to finish before nightfall.